Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Asa. Rutledge had been driving for 18 hours straight when the fuel light on his Freightliner started flickering for the fourth time that night. It was 12:17 a.m. on a Thursday in late September, and the stretch of I-10 between Van Horn and Sierra Blanca was as empty as a trucker could hope for at this hour. But Asa wasn't hoping for empty roads tonight. He was hoping for witnesses. The kind of witnesses that would make what he was carrying seem legitimate. The kind that would back up his story if anyone ever asked questions. But there were no witnesses out here. Just the highway, the distant fence line that marked the border 30 miles south, and the sound of his own breathing mixing with the diesel rumble of the engine. The manifest clipped to his visor said he was hauling industrial compressor parts from El Paso to a warehouse outside of San Antonio. Routine freight, standard route. Nothing that should make a man's hands sweat on the steering wheel the way Asa's were sweating now. The problem wasn't the cargo itself. The problem was how he'd gotten it. 3 days ago, Asa had been sitting in a truck stop outside of El Paso when a man in a tan jacket approached him. The man didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask Asa's name. He just slid a folded piece of paper across the table and said, "You're Rutledge. You drive the white Freightliner with the red stripe. You're heading east on Thursday." Asa had stared at the paper without opening it. "Who are you?" The man smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Someone who knows you've been running late on your payments. Someone who knows your dispatcher has been talking about letting you go. Someone who can make sure neither of those things matter anymore." Asa unfolded the paper. It was a pickup address in El Paso, a delivery address in San Antonio, and a number. $15,000. Cash. Half up front, half on delivery. "What's the catch?" Asa had asked. The man stood up. "No catch. You pick up the load. You drive it where it needs to go. You don't ask questions. You don't open the trailer. You don't talk to anyone about it. And you sure as hell don't stop for anything except fuel." The man had walked away before Asa could respond. And Asa, because he was 3 months behind on his truck payments and 2 weeks away from losing his contract, had shown up at that El Paso warehouse on Thursday morning. The warehouse had been exactly where the paper said it would be. A nondescript metal building in an industrial zone near the airport. No signs, no company name, just a roll-up door and a man in a forklift waiting inside. The forklift operator had been young, maybe 25, with a neck tattoo of a scorpion and a way of not making eye contact that told Asa this wasn't the kid's first time loading questionable freight. The pallets had been wrapped in black shrink wrap, heavy and dense. The bill of lading had been filled out in handwriting so poor that Asa couldn't read the signature. But the load number matched, and the weight matched, and when Asa asked what was inside, the forklift operator had just shrugged and said, "Parts, man, just parts." Asa had signed the paperwork, secured the load, and pulled out onto I-10 heading east. That had been 14 hours ago, and for 14 hours, Asa had been telling himself that this was just another load, that $15,000 was enough to save his livelihood, that he didn't need to know what was in those pallets as long as it got delivered. But then, 2 hours ago, the ticking had started. It wasn't loud. At first, Asa thought it was just the normal sounds a loaded trailer makes. The creak of the suspension, the flex of the frame. But this was different. This was rhythmic, a metallic ticking sound coming from the rear axle assembly on the trailer, specifically from the left side. It happened every few seconds, tick, tick, tick. Asa had pulled over once at a rest stop near Fort Hancock to check it out. He'd walked around the trailer with a flashlight inspecting the brake chambers, the air lines, the wheel bearings. Everything looked normal, but when he stood near the rear doors of the trailer, he could hear it more clearly. It wasn't coming from the axle, it was coming from inside the trailer, from the cargo. Asa had stood there for a full minute, flashlight in hand, staring at the locked trailer doors. The padlock was the kind you couldn't cut without heavy-duty bolt cutters. The kind that said, "Don't even think about it." And Asa, because he wasn't stupid, had gotten back in his truck and driven away. But the ticking hadn't stopped. It had gotten louder. And now, as Asa passed mile marker 112, it was loud enough that he could hear it over the engine. He reached for the CB radio and switched it to channel 19, the standard trucker channel, the one where guys talked about traffic, weather, speed traps. But when Asa keyed the mic and said, "This is eastbound I-10, mile marker 112, anybody out there?" all he got back was static. He tried again. "Anybody listening on 19? This is a Freightliner eastbound looking for some company." Nothing, just the hiss of an empty channel. Asa switched to channel 9, the emergency channel. He didn't know why. He wasn't in an emergency, not yet, but something in his gut told him to try. He keyed the mic. "Channel 9, this is eastbound I-10, mile 112, just checking if anyone's monitoring." The response came immediately. A man's voice, older, rough, like someone who'd smoked 2 packs a day for 40 years. "Rutledge, you need to keep driving." Asa's heart skipped. He keyed the mic. "Who is this? How do you know my name?" The voice came back. "You need to keep driving. Do not stop. Do not pull over. The next rest area is closed. Do you understand me? Keep driving." The channel went dead. Asa tried again. "Who the hell is this? Answer me." Static. Asa's hands were shaking now. He put the mic back in its cradle and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. His speedometer read 72 miles per hour. The posted limit was 75, but trucks weren't supposed to go over 70. Asa pressed the accelerator. 73, 74. The ticking from the trailer got faster. Or maybe it just seemed that way. Maybe his heart was pounding so hard that everything sounded faster. He checked his mirrors. Behind him, maybe half a mile back, a single set of headlights. Not a truck. A car. It had been there for the last 20 minutes, keeping the same distance. Asa switched lanes. The car switched lanes. Asa switched back. The car switched back. Asa grabbed the CB again. Channel 19. "Anybody out there? I've got a vehicle following me. Eastbound I-10, mile marker 114. Can anybody confirm?" No response. He tried channel 9 again. "This is an emergency. I have a vehicle tailing me. I need assistance." The voice came back. The same voice. "Rutledge. Rest area in 2 miles. Pull in, now." Asa's blood went cold. "I'm not pulling over. Tell me who you are." "You don't have a choice. Pull into the rest area. Do it now." The sign appeared in his headlights. Rest area 2 miles, closed for maintenance. Asa knew this rest area. It had been closed for at least 5 years. No lights, no services. Just a crumbling parking lot and a boarded-up restroom building. Nobody went there. Not even homeless drifters. The car behind him was getting closer. Asa could see it now in his side mirror. A dark sedan, maybe a Dodge Charger. Tinted windows, no front plate. It was 50 yards back, then 30, then 20. Asa's mind raced. He could keep going. He could blow past the rest area and keep driving until he hit Sierra Blanca. There was a truck stop there. Lights. People. Witnesses. But the voice on the CB had said he didn't have a choice. And the car was right on his bumper now. close enough that Asa could see the silhouette of the driver. One person, male, wearing something dark. The rest area exit appeared. Asa made a decision. He flipped his turn signal and took the ramp. The moment he turned onto the exit, the ticking in the trailer stopped. Just like that. Complete silence. Asa's stomach dropped. He slowed the truck to 30 miles per hour as he rolled down the ramp and into the rest area parking lot. The lot was exactly as he remembered it. Cracked asphalt. Faded parking lines. A single building at the far end, dark and abandoned. But there were 2 trucks parked in the lot. Both of them were semi-trucks. One was a faded red Peterbilt with no trailer attached. The other was a white Kenworth with a refrigerated trailer. Neither had their lights on. Neither had their engines running. They were just sitting there, parked side by side, like 2 dead insects in a shadow box. Asa brought his truck to a stop about 50 yards from the other 2 trucks. He put it in neutral and set the parking brake. The car that had been following him pulled in behind him, rolled past slowly, and parked near the abandoned building. The driver didn't get out. Asa sat in his cab, engine idling, staring at the 2 parked trucks. His CB radio crackled. The same voice. "Get out of the truck, Rutledge." Asa keyed the mic. "What the hell is going on?" "Get out of the truck, walk to the Kenworth, do it now." Asa didn't move. His hand hovered over the gear shift. He could throw it into first, pop the brake and punch the accelerator. He could be back on I-10 in 30 seconds. But then what? The car would follow him. And whoever these people were, they knew his name. They knew his route. They knew what he was carrying. Asa opened the driver's door and climbed down. The air outside was cooler than he expected. Dry. The kind of cold that comes with high desert nights. He could hear the wind moving through the scrub brush beyond the parking lot. He could hear the faint hum of power lines somewhere in the distance. But he couldn't hear the 2 trucks. No engine sounds. No movement. He started walking toward the Kenworth. His boots crunched on the broken asphalt. When he was about 20 feet away, the driver's door of the Kenworth opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, maybe 6'3", wearing a Border Patrol uniform, dark green pants, tan shirt, badge on the chest. He had a shaved head and a goatee flecked with gray. He looked at Asa and said, "You Rutledge?" Asa stopped walking. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "Alton Keever, Border Patrol Supervisor. We need to talk about what you're carrying." Asa's mind went into overdrive. Border Patrol. That made sense. He was 30 miles from the border. This was their jurisdiction. But why the cloak and dagger? Why the CB radio games? Why the closed rest area? Alton Keever walked closer. He wasn't armed, or at least Asa couldn't see a weapon. "You know what's in your trailer, Rutledge?" Asa shook his head. "Compressor parts. Industrial freight." Alton Keever laughed. It was a short, humorless sound. "Compressor parts. That's good. That's real good." He looked past Asa toward the Freightliner. "You ever wonder why somebody would pay you $15,000 to haul compressor parts?" Asa didn't answer. Alton took another step closer. "Let me tell you what's in your trailer, Rutledge. You're hauling 73 bundles of raw industrial precursor chemicals, the kind used to make synthetic opioids, fentanyl precursors specifically. Enough to produce about 2 million doses once it's processed. Street value, conservatively, $40 million, and you just drove it across half of West Texas without a care in the world." Asa felt like the ground was tilting. "I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know." Alton Keever nodded. "I believe you. You're a mule. A blind mule. They picked you because you're desperate and you're clean. No priors, no red flags. Just a guy trying to keep his truck." He gestured toward the freightliner. But here's the thing, Rutledge. That load is flagged. We've been tracking it since it left El Paso. We know where it's going. We know who's waiting for it. And we need you to deliver it. Asa stared at him. You want me to deliver it? To who? To the people who hired you. You're going to drive that truck to San Antonio. You're going to drop the load at the warehouse. And you're going to walk away. And in exchange, we're going to forget you were ever involved. Asa's voice cracked. And if I say no? Alton Keever's smile faded. Then you're going to federal prison for trafficking, and your family is going to lose everything, your truck, your house, your wife's car, all of it. So you don't get to say no, Rutledge. Before Asa could respond, a new sound cut through the night. The growl of a diesel engine. Asa turned and saw headlights coming up the rest area ramp. A tow truck, an old Peterbilt wrecker, faded yellow with rust streaks on the doors. It rolled into the parking lot and stopped next to Asa's freightliner. The driver got out. He was short and stocky, maybe 50 years old, wearing grease-stained coveralls and a ball cap. He had a face like old leather, creased and sun-damaged. He looked at Asa, then at Alton Keever and said, "This the guy?" Alton nodded. "This is him." The wrecker driver walked over. He extended a hand to Asa. "Zebediah Polk, wrecker operator. I'm here to make sure your truck gets to San Antonio in one piece." Asa didn't shake his hand. "I don't understand. Why do you need a wrecker operator?" Zebediah Polk grinned. It was a gap-toothed, yellow grin. "Because, friend, your trailer's got a problem. That ticking you've been hearing? That's a GPS tracker. The people who loaded your truck put it there. And if you deviate from your route, or if you try to dump the load, that tracker sends a signal. And when that signal gets sent, some very bad people show up to ask you questions. But here's the good news. I can disable that tracker. I can make it so they think you're still on schedule, still en route, while you take a little detour. A detour that involves us swapping out your trailer for a dummy trailer. Same weight, same dimensions, but clean cargo. You deliver the dummy trailer, the bad guys unload it, and by the time they realize what happened, we've got the real trailer in federal custody, and you, my friend, get to go home." Asa looked from Zebediah Polk to Alton Keever. "This is insane. You're asking me to help you run a sting operation." Alton Keever shrugged. "We're not asking, Rutledge. We're telling. You're already in this. The moment you picked up that load, you became part of a federal investigation. Now you can be a witness, or you can be a defendant, your choice." Asa felt sick. He looked at his truck, sitting there in the dark. The trailer full of poison. He thought about his wife. His 2 kids. The mortgage payment he couldn't make. The truck loan that was already in default. He thought about $15,000. Half up front, half on delivery. He thought about the man in the tan jacket who had handed him that folded piece of paper. And he realized with cold clarity that he had never had a choice. Not from the beginning. "What do I have to do?" Alton Keever smiled. "You're going to drive out of here. You're going to head east on I-10. In about 40 miles, you're going to see a rest area sign. A real rest area, not this one. You're going to pull in there. Zebediah is going to meet you there with the dummy trailer. You're going to swap trailers, and then you're going to drive to San Antonio. When you get to the warehouse, you're going to back up to the loading dock, drop the trailer, and walk away. You're not going to stick around to watch them unload. You're not going to ask questions. You're going to get in your truck and drive back to El Paso, and when you get there, you're going to forget this ever happened. Do you understand?" Asa nodded slowly. "What if they figure it out? What if they realize the trailer's been swapped?" Zebediah Polk laughed. "They won't. The dummy trailer is an exact match. Same DOT number, same plates, same seals. The only difference is what's inside, and by the time they crack it open, you'll be long gone. Alton Keever walked back toward the Kenworth. Get back in your truck, Rutledge. You've got a delivery to make. Asa turned and walked back to his Freightliner. His legs felt like rubber. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the door handle. He climbed into the cab and closed the door. The CB radio crackled. Alton Keever's voice. Rutledge, one more thing. Don't try to be a hero. Don't try to run. Don't try to warn anybody. Because if you do, we'll know. And if we know, you'll wish you'd just delivered the load. The channel went dead. Asa put the truck in gear and rolled out of the rest area. As he pulled back onto I-10, he looked in his side mirror. The two trucks were still parked there, the Kenworth and the Peterbilt. The car that had followed him was gone, and Zebediah Polk's wrecker was pulling out behind him, headlights off, following at a distance. Asa drove east into the darkness, and the ticking in the trailer started again. The 40 miles between the closed rest area and the legitimate truck stop near Fort Hancock felt like 400. Asa kept his speed at exactly 70 miles per hour, his eyes flicking between the road ahead and the rearview mirror where Zebediah Polk's wrecker followed at a steady distance, headlights still off, just a dark shape against the darker desert. The ticking in the trailer had returned the moment Asa pulled back onto I-10, and now it seemed to synchronize with his heartbeat. Tick, tick, tick. He tried not to think about what Alton Keever had told him. 73 bundles of fentanyl precursors. $40 million street value. 2 million doses. The numbers were too big to process, too abstract to feel real. But the fear was real. The fear was a tight fist wrapped around his lungs, making every breath shallow and difficult. Asa had driven trucks for 22 years. He'd hauled everything from frozen chickens to construction equipment. He'd driven through blizzards in Montana and dust storms in Arizona. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight on more than one occasion. But he had never, not once, felt the kind of cold terror that was coursing through him now. Because this wasn't weather, this wasn't fatigue, this was a trap, and he was the bait. The sign for the Fort Hancock rest area appeared in his headlights at 1:47 a.m. Rest area 1 mile, all services available. Asa put on his turn signal and began to slow down. Behind him, Zebediah Polk's wrecker turned its headlights on and followed. The rest area was moderately busy for this time of night. 6 or 7 trucks parked in the lot, their running lights glowing like fireflies. A few cars clustered near the restroom building. An RV parked sideways across 3 spots. Normal, safe witnesses. Asa pulled into a spot near the far end of the lot, away from the other vehicles but not so far that it looked suspicious. He set the parking brake and cut the engine. For a moment, he just sat there, hands still on the wheel, listening to the tick of the cooling engine and the fainter tick from the trailer. Then the CB crackled. Zebediah Polk's voice rough and matter-of-fact. Step out of the cab, Rutledge. Walk to the restrooms. Take your time. 5 minutes. When you come back, your trailer will be different. Asa keyed the mic. How long is this going to take? Long enough. Don't worry about it. Just do what I said. Asa climbed down from the cab and walked across the parking lot. The air was cold enough now that he could see his breath. Overhead, the stars were sharp and bright, the kind of stars you only see in the desert when there's no light pollution for 100 miles. He passed a trucker standing outside his rig, smoking a cigarette. The man nodded at him. Asa nodded back. Normal, just another driver making a pit stop. Inside the restroom building, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The tiles were cracked and stained. The smell of industrial cleaner mixed with something far less pleasant. Asa went to the sink and splashed cold water on his face. He looked at himself in the mirror. His eyes were bloodshot. His face was pale. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. He looked like a man who was in over his head. And he was. He stayed in the restroom for exactly 5 minutes, timing it on his watch. Then he walked back out into the cold desert night. His Freightliner was still where he'd left it, but the trailer behind it looked different. Asa couldn't put his finger on what had changed. The dimensions were the same. The color was the same. The DOT number on the side was the same. But something about it felt wrong. Maybe it was the way the shadows fell across the ridges in the aluminum siding. Maybe it was the smell. Or maybe it was just Asa's paranoia telling him that he was now hauling a lie instead of the truth. Zebediah Polk was standing beside the wrecker, which was now parked 2 spots away. He was holding a clipboard and writing something down, like he was filling out a service report. When Asa approached, Zebediah looked up and grinned that same gap-toothed grin. "All done, friend. Clean swap. Original trailer is already on its way to a federal impound lot. You're now hauling 4,800 pounds of sand and gravel wrapped up to look like chemical bundles. If they scan it, it'll show the right density. If they X-ray it, it'll show the right shapes. And if they're really thorough and crack it open, well, they'll get a face full of dust." Asa stared at the trailer. "What about the GPS tracker? You said there was a tracker." Zebediah tapped the side of his nose. "Already handled. I pulled the tracker off the original trailer and stuck it on this one. Far as the bad guys know, you're still right on schedule. But here's the thing, Rutledge. That tracker is also transmitting to us. So if you get any funny ideas about taking a detour or dumping this load somewhere it's not supposed to go, we'll know. And we'll come get you. Understand?" Asa nodded. He understood. He was being watched from both sides now. The people who hired him thought he was delivering their poison. The feds thought he was delivering their decoy. And if either side figured out the truth, Asa would be the one who paid the price. Zebediah Polk climbed back into his wrecker. "You've got about 3 hours to San Antonio. Warehouse address is on your manifest. You pull up, you back in, you drop the trailer, you unhook, and you leave. Don't talk to anybody. Don't ask questions. Don't stick around. Just drop it and go. We'll handle the rest." He started the wrecker's engine. "Oh, and Rutledge? Good luck." The wrecker pulled out of the rest area and disappeared onto I-10 heading west. Asa stood there for a moment, alone in the parking lot, feeling the weight of what he'd just agreed to. Then he climbed back into his Freightliner, fired up the engine, and pulled out onto the highway heading east. The ticking was gone now. The trailer was silent. But somehow that was worse. At least the ticking had been something he could hear, something tangible. Now there was just silence, and silence meant he had no idea what was really happening. He drove for 2 hours without incident. The highway stretched out ahead of him, straight and empty. He passed mile marker after mile marker. He watched the towns roll by in the darkness. Marfa, Alpine, Marathon. Small towns with big sky, the kind of places where people lived quiet lives and didn't ask too many questions. Asa envied them. At 3:52 a.m., his CB radio crackled again. But it wasn't Zebediah Polk this time. It wasn't Alton Keever. It was a new voice, young, nervous, urgent. "Rutledge. Asa Rutledge. Are you listening?" Asa grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" "My name doesn't matter. Listen to me. They know. The people you're delivering to. They know about the swap." Asa's heart stopped. "What? How?" "I don't know how, but they know. And they're waiting for you in San Antonio. They're going to let you drop the trailer. They're going to let you unhook. And then they're going to kill you. Do you understand? They're going to kill you." The voice cut out. Asa tried to respond. Wait, tell me who you are. Tell me how you know this. Static. Asa switched channels, tried again. Nothing. He grabbed his phone and looked at the screen. No signal. Out here in the middle of West Texas, cell coverage was spotty at best. He was alone. He looked at the road ahead. San Antonio was still 90 miles away. He could turn around. He could dump the trailer on the side of the road and run. He could call the cops. But what would he tell them? That he'd been tricked into hauling drugs? That he'd agreed to help the feds run a sting operation? That now someone was threatening to kill him? None of it sounded believable. None of it would save him. Asa made a decision. He was going to keep driving. He was going to deliver the trailer. And he was going to trust that Alton Keever and Zebediah Polk knew what they were doing. Because what other choice did he have? He pushed the accelerator and brought his speed up to 75. The Freightliner responded smoothly, the engine settling into a steady rumble. The road ahead was still empty. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, just a faint gray glow on the horizon. Dawn was coming, and with it, whatever waited for him in San Antonio. Asa thought about his wife. Her name was Rebecca. They'd been married for 19 years. She worked at a pharmacy in El Paso. She didn't know what Asa did for a living, not really. She knew he drove a truck. She knew he was gone for days at a time. But she didn't know about the late payments, the mounting debt, the desperation that had driven him to take a job from a stranger in a truck stop. Asa wondered if he'd ever see her again. He wondered if his kids, both in high school now, would remember him as a good father or as the man who got himself killed over $15,000. The thought made him grip the steering wheel tighter. At 5:18 a.m., Asa crossed into San Antonio city limits. The highway widened. Traffic started to pick up. Cars heading to early morning shifts, delivery vans, a few other trucks. Normal life resuming as the sun rose. Asa followed his GPS to the warehouse address on the manifest. It was in an industrial zone on the south side of the city near the airport. Rows of identical metal buildings, each with a roll-up door and a small office attached. No windows, no signs, just numbers stenciled on the doors. Asa found the right building. Number 47. He pulled into the lot and circled around to the back where the loading docks were. There were 3 bays, 2 were closed. The third was open, and a man was standing there waiting. The man was tall and thin, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt. He had a shaved head and tattoos running up both arms. He waved Asa forward. Asa backed the Freightliner up to the dock, nice and slow, lining up the trailer with the bay. When he felt the bump of the trailer hitting the dock bumpers, he set the parking brake and shut down the engine. The man walked up to the driver's side window and knocked. Asa rolled it down. "You Rutledge?" the man asked. Asa nodded. The man held out a clipboard. "Sign here." Asa took the clipboard and signed. His hand was shaking. The man didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did and didn't care. "You can unhook and go," the man said. "We'll take it from here." Asa climbed down from the cab and walked around to the back of the trailer. He disconnected the airlines, pulled the pin on the 5th wheel, and cranked down the landing gear. The whole process took about 3 minutes. When he was done, he climbed back into the Freightliner and pulled forward, leaving the trailer sitting on the dock. The man with the tattoos was already inside the trailer, using a pallet jack to pull out the first load. Asa didn't look back. He drove out of the lot, back onto the main road, and headed west on I-10. His hands were still shaking. His heart was still racing. But he was alive. He'd done what they asked. He'd delivered the load. Now, all he had to do was get back to El Paso and hope that Alton Keever kept his promise. But as Asa merged onto the highway, he looked in his rearview mirror and saw a car pulling out of the warehouse lot. A dark sedan, tinted windows. the same car that had followed him into the rest area the night before. The car accelerated and fell in behind him, and Asa Rutledge realized, with cold certainty, that this wasn't over. Not even close. The sedan stayed behind him for 40 miles. It didn't try to pass. It didn't flash its lights. It just followed, maintaining a steady distance of about 200 yards. Asa tried to tell himself it was a coincidence, that the car just happened to be going the same direction, but he knew better. The voice on the CB had been right. They knew about the swap, and now they were making sure Asa didn't talk. He thought about pulling over, about flagging down a cop, about doing anything to get away from the car. But what if the voice had been wrong? What if this was just Alton Keever's people making sure Asa got out of San Antonio safely? What if pulling over would just make things worse? Asa kept driving. The sedan kept following, and the sun rose higher in the Texas sky, bright and merciless, illuminating a day that Asa Rutledge was no longer sure he'd survive. At mile marker 523, just outside of Seguin, the sedan pulled up alongside him. Asa glanced over. The driver's window was down. The driver was wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. He looked at Asa, raised his hand, and pointed 2 fingers at him like a gun. Then he smiled, accelerated, and disappeared down the highway. Asa pulled over onto the shoulder, his whole body shaking. He sat there for 10 minutes, watching the traffic pass, waiting for his heart to stop pounding. And then he picked up his phone and called the only number he had, the number Alton Keever had given him. It rang 4 times before someone answered. "Keever? It's Rutledge. They know. They know about the swap." There was a long pause. Then Alton Keever said, "Get to a safe location, now. We're coming to get you." Alton Keever's instructions had been clear. Get off I-10. Take the back roads. Find somewhere public but not too public. Somewhere with witnesses but not so many that a confrontation would draw immediate attention. Asa had pulled into a truck stop outside of Bourne, 40 minutes west of San Antonio, and parked his Freightliner near the diesel pumps. It was 7:23 a.m., and the lot was filling up with morning traffic. Truckers grabbing coffee, RVs refueling, a family in a minivan arguing about directions. Asa sat in his cab with the engine off, windows rolled up, doors locked, watching every car that entered the lot. His phone was in his hand. Alton Keever's number pulled up on the screen, ready to call again if he needed to. But 20 minutes passed, and nothing happened. No dark sedan, no men in sunglasses, just normal people doing normal things. Asa started to wonder if he'd overreacted. Maybe the guy in the sedan had just been messing with him. Maybe the finger gun had been a joke, some trucker humor that Asa was too paranoid to understand. But then he remembered the voice on the CB. They know. They're going to kill you. That hadn't sounded like a joke. At 7:47 a.m., a white pickup truck pulled into the lot. It was a Ford F-250 crew cab, with heavily tinted windows and a toolbox in the bed. It drove slowly through the rows of parked vehicles, as if searching for something or someone. The truck circled past Asa's Freightliner once, then twice, then pulled into a spot 3 rows away. The engine stayed running. Nobody got out. Asa's pulse quickened. He watched the truck in his side mirror. The windows were too dark to see who was inside. He counted. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. Then the driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was wearing a Border Patrol uniform. Tan shirt, dark green pants, badge on his chest. Asa felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made him dizzy. Alton Keever had sent someone. He was going to be okay. The man walked toward Asa's truck, moving with the kind of deliberate confidence that comes from authority. When he got close, he rapped his knuckles on the driver's side door. Asa unlocked it and rolled down the window. "Asa Rutledge?" the man asked. His voice was flat, professional. Asa nodded. Yeah, that's me. Keever sent you? The man smiled. It was a thin smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. Something like that. Step out of the truck, please. We need to talk. Asa hesitated. Something about the man's tone felt off. Too formal. Too detached. Can I see some ID first? Asa asked. The man's smile faded. Step out of the truck, Rutledge. Now. Asa's hand moved to the gear shift. He could fire up the engine, throw it in gear, and punch the accelerator. He'd done it before when a situation felt wrong. But before he could turn the key, the man pulled back his shirt just enough to reveal a holstered pistol. Not a Border Patrol issue Glock. Something bigger. A Sig Sauer, maybe. The man leaned closer to the window. You can step out on your own, or I can drag you out. Your choice. Asa's mouth went dry. He opened the door and climbed down. The man grabbed him by the arm, not rough but firm, and guided him away from the Freightliner toward the white pickup. Who are you? Asa asked. The man didn't answer. When they reached the pickup, the man opened the back door and gestured for Asa to get in. Asa looked around the parking lot. The family in the minivan was still arguing. A trucker was filling his coffee cup at the pump station. Nobody was paying attention. Get in, the man said again. Asa climbed into the back seat. The interior smelled like cigarettes and fast food. There was another man sitting in the driver's seat, also wearing a Border Patrol uniform. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and a thick mustache. He turned around and looked at Asa. You're the one who's been causing problems, the driver said. It wasn't a question. Asa shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. I delivered the load. I did what I was supposed to do. The driver laughed. It was a harsh, humorless sound. You delivered sand and gravel, Rutledge. You think we're idiots? You think we wouldn't notice? The man who'd pulled Asa out of his truck climbed into the passenger seat and closed the door. The driver put the pickup in gear and pulled out of the lot. Asa's stomach dropped. Where are we going? The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Somewhere we can have a conversation without interruptions. Asa tried to open the door. It was locked. Child safety locks. He tried the other door. Same thing. He was trapped. Listen, Asa said, his voice shaking. I didn't know about the swap. They forced me, the feds. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd charge me with trafficking. I didn't have a choice. The driver turned onto a state highway heading south, away from the interstate, away from witnesses. We know all about Alton Keever, the driver said. We know about his little operation. We know he's been running decoy loads for 6 months trying to figure out our distribution network. And we know you were supposed to be his latest mule. The man in the passenger seat turned around. Here's what you're going to do, Rutledge. You're going to call Keever. You're going to tell him everything went fine. You dropped the load. You're heading back to El Paso. No problems. You're going to lie to him, and if you don't, or if you try to signal him that something's wrong, we're going to put a bullet in your head and dump you in the desert. Do you understand? Asa nodded. He understood. They handed him his phone. Call him now. Speaker mode. Asa dialed Alton Keever's number. It rang 3 times before Keever answered. Rutledge, where are you? I'm fine, Asa said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm at a truck stop near Bourne. Everything's fine. I dropped the load. No problems. There was a pause. Asa could hear background noise on Keever's end. Voices. Radio chatter. You sure you're okay? You sound off. The man in the passenger seat pointed at Asa, then at the phone. Keep it together. I'm just tired, Asa said. Long night. I'm gonna head back to El Paso, get some sleep. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay. Call me when you get home." The line went dead. Asa lowered the phone. The man in the passenger seat smiled. "Good job, see? That wasn't so hard." The driver turned onto a dirt road that led into open desert. The truck bounced over ruts and rocks, dust billowing up behind them. They drove for 10 minutes, maybe 15, until there was nothing around them but scrub brush and distant mesas. Then the driver stopped the truck and shut off the engine. The silence was absolute. No traffic, no wind, just the faint ticking of the cooling engine. The man in the passenger seat turned around again. "Here's the thing, Rutledge. We believe you. We believe you got caught up in something you didn't understand. We believe the feds pressured you, but that doesn't change the fact that you cost us $40 million, and people don't just walk away from that kind of loss." Asa's heart was hammering. "What do you want from me?" "Information," the driver said. "We want to know everything Keever told you. Every detail about his operation, where the real trailer is, who else is involved, everything." Asa's mind raced. If he told them everything, they'd kill him. If he told them nothing, they'd kill him. Either way, he was dead. Unless... "I don't know where the trailer is," Asa said. "Keever didn't tell me. All I know is that a wrecker operator named Zebediah Polk did the swap. He took the trailer somewhere, I don't know where." The driver and the passenger exchanged a glance. "Zebediah Polk," the driver repeated. "Where can we find him?" "I don't know," Asa said. "I only met him once, at a rest area outside Fort Hancock. He drove an old Peterbilt wrecker, yellow with rust spots. That's all I know." The man in the passenger seat pulled out his phone and made a call. He spoke quietly, giving someone Zebediah Polk's name and description. Then he hung up. "We'll find him," he said to the driver. Then he turned to Asa. "You're lucky, Rutledge. We're not going to kill you. Not yet. You're going to be useful to us." Asa felt a flicker of hope. "How?" "You're going to keep working with Keever. You're going to feed us information. Every load he runs, every operation he plans, you're going to tell us about it. And if you do a good job, maybe we'll let you live." The driver started the engine. "But if you try to run, or if you try to warn Keever, we'll know, and we'll come for you, and it won't be quick." They drove back to the truck stop in silence. When they arrived, they let Asa out near his Freightliner. The man in the passenger seat leaned out the window. "We'll be in touch, Rutledge, real soon." The white pickup drove away. Asa stood in the parking lot shaking, his legs barely able to support him. He climbed back into his Freightliner and locked the doors. For a long time he just sat there, staring at the dashboard, trying to process what had just happened. He was alive, but he was now working for both sides. The feds thought he was their cooperating witness. The cartel thought he was their informant. And sooner or later one side was going to figure out that he was lying. Asa picked up his phone and stared at Alton Keever's number. He should call him. He should tell him what happened. But if he did, Keever would pull him out of the operation. They'd put him in witness protection, or worse, they'd cut him loose and let him fend for himself. Either way, his life as he knew it would be over. Asa put the phone down. He started the engine and pulled out of the truck stop, heading west on I-10 toward El Paso. The road stretched out ahead of him, long and empty, just like it always had. But now every mile felt like a countdown to the moment when one side or the other would demand proof of his loyalty. And Asa had no idea what he would do when that moment came. He drove for 3 hours without stopping. The landscape around him shifted from rolling hills to flat desert, the same desert he'd crossed the night before. But it looked different now, hostile. Every vehicle that passed felt like a threat. Every rest area looked like a trap. When his phone rang, Asa nearly drove off the road. He grabbed it, expecting Alton Kiever or the men in the white pickup, but the caller ID said, "Unknown number." Asa answered. "Hello?" Static. Then a voice, the same young, nervous voice from the CB radio. "Rutledge, you're in danger, real danger." "Who is this?" Asa demanded. "How do you keep getting my number?" "That doesn't matter. Listen to me. The men who picked you up at the truck stop, they're not cartel. They're freelancers, mercenaries. Kiever hired them to test you, to see if you'd flip. And you did." Asa's blood ran cold. "What?" "Kiever knows you talked. He knows you gave up Zebediah Polk. He's going to use you to flush out the real cartel. And when he's done, he's going to throw you away. You need to disappear, now, before it's too late." The line went dead. Asa pulled over onto the shoulder. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. He didn't know who to trust anymore. He didn't know who was telling the truth. All he knew was that he was caught in the middle of something far bigger and far more dangerous than a simple drug shipment. At 2:34 p.m., Asa crossed back into El Paso. The city rose up out of the desert like a mirage, all concrete and glass and traffic. Home. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like enemy territory. Asa drove to his house, a small ranch-style place on the east side of town. His wife's car was in the driveway. She was home. Asa parked the Freightliner on the street and walked to the front door. His key was in the lock when the door opened. Rebecca stood there, her face pale, her eyes red. "Asa," she said, "there are people here. They've been waiting for you." Asa's heart sank. He stepped inside. Sitting in his living room were two men. One was Alton Kiever, the other was a man Asa didn't recognize. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit. He had the look of someone who'd spent time in the military. Alton Kiever stood up. "Rutledge, we need to talk." Asa looked at his wife. "Rebecca, go upstairs." She hesitated, then nodded and left. Asa turned to Kiever. "Who's this?" The man in the suit extended his hand. "I'm with the DEA. My name's not important. What's important is that you're coming with us, right now." Asa didn't move. "Why?" Alton Kiever stepped closer. "Because Zebediah Polk is dead, and the people who killed him are coming for you next." They took Asa to a motel on the outskirts of El Paso. Not the kind of place that appeared in travel brochures. The kind with hourly rates and flickering neon signs and rooms that smelled like cigarette smoke no matter how many times they'd been cleaned. Room 14, second floor. A window that overlooked the parking lot and the desert beyond. Alton Kiever stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the highway in the distance. The DEA agent sat at the small table, laptop open, typing rapidly. Asa sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, trying to process what he'd just been told. Zebediah Polk was dead. They'd found him in his wrecker on a service road outside of Fort Hancock. Single gunshot to the head. Execution style. The wrecker had been torched. Whatever evidence had been inside was gone, and the original trailer, the one with the real precursor chemicals, had vanished. "How did they find him?" Asa asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alton Kiever didn't turn from the window. "The same way they found you. They've got people everywhere, dispatchers, warehouse workers, even some law enforcement. We knew there were leaks, but we didn't know how deep they went." The DEA agent stopped typing and looked at Asa. "Let me be very clear about your situation, Rutledge. You are now a target. The people you delivered that dummy load to know who you are. They know where you live. They know about your wife, your kids, your truck, everything. And they're going to come for you because as far as they're concerned, you helped us steal $40 million worth of product. Asa felt sick. So what am I supposed to do? Go into witness protection? Disappear? Alton Keever finally turned from the window. That's one option. We can relocate you and your family. New names, new town, new life. But it takes time. Weeks, maybe months to process the paperwork. And in the meantime, you'd be living in protective custody. Places like this. He gestured around the dingy motel room. Is that what you want? Asa thought about his wife, his kids, his house, the life he'd built over 2 decades. All of it gone because he'd been desperate enough to take $15,000 from a stranger. What's the other option? He asked. The DEA agent closed his laptop. The other option is you help us finish what we started. We use you as bait. We leak information that you know where the original trailer is. We make them come to you. And when they do, we're ready. Asa stared at him. You want me to be bait? You want me to sit around and wait for someone to put a bullet in my head like they did to Zebediah Polk? We'll have eyes on you 24/7, the DEA agent said. Surveillance teams, undercover agents. The second anyone makes a move, we'll be there. And what if you're not fast enough? Asa shot back. What if they take me somewhere remote like they did this morning? What if they kill me before you can get there? Alton Keever sat down on the other bed, across from Asa. He looked tired. Older than he had the night before. I'm not going to lie to you, Rutledge. It's dangerous. There's risk involved. But if we don't do this, they'll keep coming. They'll never stop. They'll go after your family, your friends, anyone connected to you. This is the only way to end it. Asa wanted to scream. He wanted to throw something, but instead he just sat there, feeling the weight of every bad decision he'd ever made pressing down on him. How long? He asked. How long would I have to do this? A week, the DEA agent said. Maybe 2. We're already putting the word out, making it known that you're back in El Paso, making it look like you're vulnerable. Sooner or later, they'll bite. Asa thought about the man in the white pickup. The one who'd told him they'd be in touch. The one who'd said they'd come for him if he tried to run. What if they already know? Asa said. What if the people who picked me up this morning were the real cartel? Alton Keever and the DEA agent exchanged a glance. Tell us exactly what happened, Keever said. Asa recounted the entire encounter. The truck stop, the fake Border Patrol agents, the drive into the desert, the interrogation, the threat. When he was finished, the DEA agent cursed under his breath. Those weren't our people, he said. We didn't send anyone to that truck stop. Asa felt his stomach drop. Then who were they? Freelancers, Keever said. Or worse, actual cartel operatives posing as law enforcement. Either way, they know you gave up Zebediah Polk's name, which means they probably already got to him before we could. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Asa said, So what you're telling me is that I'm already compromised. They already know I talked, which means I'm already dead. The DEA agent leaned forward. Not necessarily. If they wanted you dead, you'd be dead already. The fact that they let you go means they want something from you. They want information. And as long as you're useful, you're alive. Asa stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for a few cars and a semi-truck parked near the office. It looked like his Freightliner, same color, same model, but it wasn't. His truck was back at his house sitting in the street, a giant target announcing his presence. I need to talk to my wife, Asa said. Alton Keever shook his head. Not yet. We need to keep her separated from this. The less she knows, the safer she is. She's already involved, Asa said, his voice rising. She saw you in my house. She knows something's wrong. You can't just expect her to sit there and wait while I disappear into some federal protection scheme. We'll handle your wife, the DEA agent said. We'll tell her you're assisting with an investigation. We'll tell her you're safe, but you can't contact her directly, not until this is over. Asa turned to face them. And what if it's never over? What if you never catch these people? What if I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? Neither man answered. Because they didn't have an answer. Asa realized in that moment that he was expendable, a pawn in a game he didn't understand, and whether he lived or died depended entirely on factors outside his control. Over the next 3 days, Asa stayed in the motel room. Alton Keever, or the DEA agent, was always there, taking shifts. They brought him food. They let him watch TV. They let him use his phone, but only under supervision. Asa called his dispatcher and told him he was taking some personal time. He called his wife and told her everything was fine, that he'd be home soon, that she didn't need to worry. He could hear the doubt in her voice, the fear, but he couldn't tell her the truth. On the 4th day, Alton Keever came into the room with news. We've got movement. Someone's been asking around about you. Trucker circles. CB chatter. They're looking for your location. Asa's pulse quickened. What kind of someone? We don't know yet, but they're being careful, using intermediaries, paying people for information. It's only a matter of time before they narrow it down. The DEA agent came in behind Keever. We're going to move you, put you somewhere more visible, somewhere they can get to you. Where? Asa asked. Alton Keever pulled out a map and spread it on the table. There's a truck stop on I-10, about 50 miles east of here. Big place, lots of traffic. You're going to park your rig there, you're going to act like you're taking a break, and you're going to wait. They moved him that night. Asa drove his Freightliner out of El Paso, heading east on I-10, the same route he'd taken 4 days ago. But this time, he wasn't hauling anything. The trailer was empty, a decoy, just like the load he'd delivered to San Antonio. Asa wondered if his entire life had become a decoy, a fake version of himself, moving through the world, waiting to be sacrificed. The truck stop appeared at mile marker 87. Asa pulled in, parked near the fuel pumps, and shut down the engine. He sat in the cab, windows cracked, listening to the sounds of the night. Diesel engines idling, air brakes hissing, the distant hum of the interstate. Alton Keever's voice came through the earpiece they'd given him. We've got eyes on you, Rutledge. 3 surveillance units, 2 in the lot, 1 on the highway. You're covered. Asa didn't respond. He just sat there, waiting. An hour passed, then 2. Asa's eyelids grew heavy. He fought to stay awake, but exhaustion was pulling him under. He thought about closing his eyes, just for a minute, just to rest. He was asleep when the knock came. A sharp rap on the driver's side window. Asa jerked awake, his heart hammering. A man stood outside the truck. He was wearing a dark jacket and jeans. His face was obscured by the shadows. Asa reached for the door lock, but the man held up his hands. Easy, Rutledge. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to talk. Asa spoke into the earpiece. Keever, someone's here. No response. Asa tried again. Keever, do you copy? Static. The man outside knocked again. Your friends can't hear you, Rutledge. We're jamming the signal. Now open the door. Asa hesitated. Then he unlocked the door and rolled down the window. The man stepped closer. He was younger than Asa expected, maybe 30. Clean-shaven. Almost ordinary looking. Who are you? Asa asked. The man smiled. I'm the person who's been trying to keep you alive. The one who's been calling you, warning you." Asa stared at him. "Why?" "Because you're not the bad guy here, Rutledge. You're just a guy who made a mistake. And I know what that's like." The man glanced over his shoulder, then back at Asa. "You need to leave right now. Keever's operation is compromised. The people watching you aren't all feds. Some of them are cartel. They're waiting for the right moment to take you, and when they do, Keever won't be able to stop them." Asa felt a chill run through him. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" The man pulled out his phone and showed Asa a photo. It was a surveillance shot of the truck stop, taken from above. In the image, Asa could see his Freightliner, and he could see 3 vehicles parked nearby. 2 were unmarked sedans. The third was a white pickup, the same white pickup from the truck stop in Bourne. "They're here," the man said. "They've been here the whole time, and Keever either doesn't know or he doesn't care." Asa's hands were shaking. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to drive away. Right now. Don't tell Keever. Don't call your wife. Just drive. Get as far away from here as you can, and don't come back." "Where am I supposed to go?" The man stepped back from the truck. "That's up to you. But if you stay here, you're dead. Make your choice." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows between the parked trucks. Asa sat in the cab, his mind racing. He looked at the rearview mirror. The white pickup was still there, 3 rows back, waiting. Asa reached for the ignition. His hand hovered over the key. And then he made his decision. He started the engine. The Freightliner rumbled to life. Asa put it in gear and pulled out of the parking spot. He drove slowly through the lot, past the fuel pumps, past the convenience store, past the other trucks. He could see headlights flicker on behind him. The white pickup was following. So were the 2 unmarked sedans. Asa turned onto the I-10 on-ramp and accelerated. The speedometer climbed. 60, 70, 80. He pushed the Freightliner as hard as it would go. The vehicles behind him kept pace. And Asa Rutledge drove east into the Texas night, not knowing where he was going, not knowing who he could trust, not knowing if he would ever see his family again. All he knew was that the road stretched out ahead of him, empty and dark, and that somewhere behind him, people were coming. People who wanted him dead. People who wanted him alive. And Asa had no idea which was worse. The CB radio crackled. Alton Keever's voice, distant and distorted. "Rutledge? Where are you going? Rutledge, respond." Asa reached for the radio. His hand hovered over the mic. Then he turned it off. The silence that followed was absolute. He drove for another hour before he saw the lights in his rearview mirror. Red and blue, flashing. A police cruiser coming up fast behind him. Asa's first instinct was relief. Police meant safety. Police meant witnesses. But then he remembered the fake Border Patrol agents, the men in uniforms who'd threatened to kill him, and he realized that a badge didn't mean anything anymore. The cruiser pulled alongside him, lights still flashing. The officer inside gestured for Asa to pull over. Asa looked ahead. The highway was empty. No other cars, no witnesses. If he pulled over, he'd be alone with whoever was in that cruiser. And he'd never know if they were real cops or just more people trying to kill him. Asa made his second decision of the night. He kept driving. The cruiser stayed alongside him for a moment, then fell back. Asa watched in the mirror as it accelerated, trying to get in front of him. But the Freightliner was already at 85 miles per hour, the governor screaming, and the cruiser couldn't keep up. It fell back. And then, slowly, it stopped. The lights went dark, and it just sat there on the highway, motionless, as Asa drove away. Asa didn't stop until he reached the New Mexico border. He pulled off at a rest area, parked in the darkest corner of the lot, and sat in the cab with the engine off. His hands were still shaking. His heart was still pounding. He pulled out his phone and looked at the screen. 17 missed calls, 12 from Alton Kiever, 5 from unknown numbers, and 1 text message from his wife. "Where are you? Please call me. I'm scared." Asa stared at the message for a long time. Then he turned off the phone. He leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if he'd ever be able to go home. He didn't know if the people chasing him would ever give up. All he knew was that he'd made a choice, and he'd have to live with the consequences. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the trailer behind him. Asa listened to it for a while. Then he started the engine and pulled back onto the highway, heading west this time, away from El Paso, away from everything he'd ever known. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but Asa Rutledge kept driving, because that's what truckers do. They keep moving, even when they don't know where they're going, even when they're running from something they can't escape. They just keep driving. And somewhere behind him, in the Texas night, the people who wanted answers were still searching, still waiting, still watching the highways, waiting for Asa Rutledge to make a mistake, waiting for him to stop running. But Asa wasn't going to stop. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Obadiah Kincannon had been driving Highway NM9 for 11 years, and in all that time, he'd never seen a dust storm come up this fast. One minute the road was clear, the desert visible for miles in every direction under the late afternoon sun. The next minute, the sky turned the color of rust, and the wind hit like a fist. Obadiah downshifted his Kenworth and slowed from 65 to 40 as the first wave of dust rolled across the highway. His headlights barely penetrated 10 feet ahead. The wipers smeared red-brown grit across the windshield in thick streaks. He'd been hauling refrigerated produce from Las Cruces to a distribution center in Douglas, Arizona, a route he'd run hundreds of times. NM9 was the lonely southern corridor that paralleled the border, cutting through ranch land and Bureau of Land Management territory where you could drive for an hour without seeing another vehicle. Most truckers avoided it. Too remote, too many places where a breakdown could leave you stranded. But Obadiah liked the solitude, liked the way the desert opened up around him, endless and indifferent. He'd grown up in ranch country outside of Deeming, knew these lands the way some men knew the city streets. But this storm was different. This wasn't the usual afternoon wind that kicked up dust devils and rattled through the mesquite. This was something bigger, something that made visibility drop to 0 and turned the air into a grinding, choking fog. Obadiah reached for his CB radio and switched to channel 19. "This is westbound NM9, mile marker 34. Anybody out there hearing about this storm?" Static answered him. He tried again. "Any westbound traffic on Highway 9? This is a Kenworth reefer hauling produce, looking for weather updates." Nothing but the hiss of an empty channel. Obadiah switched to the weather band on his truck's radio. The automated voice was reporting high wind warnings for Hidalgo County, gusts up to 60 miles per hour, visibility near 0 in some areas. Travelers advised to seek shelter immediately. Obadiah looked at his fuel gauge. He had enough diesel to make it to Douglas, but that was still 90 miles away. He looked at his GPS. The nearest town was Animas, population maybe 200, another 15 miles west. But between here and there, nothing. Just open desert and the occasional ranch road leading off into nowhere. The smart thing would be to pull over and wait it out. But the load he was carrying had a delivery window. Produce didn't wait. If he missed the window, the distributor would refuse the shipment and Obadiah would eat the cost. $15,000 worth of lettuce, tomatoes, and bell peppers that would rot in his trailer if he didn't get them delivered on time. He kept driving. The wind was pushing against the side of the trailer now, rocking the entire rig. Obadiah could feel it in the steering wheel, the constant pressure trying to force him into the oncoming lane. Not that there was an oncoming lane anymore. The highway had disappeared. All he could see was the faint outline of the asphalt directly in front of his bumper and the boiling wall of dust that surrounded him on all sides. His speed dropped to 30, then 20. The Kenworth crawled forward like a blind animal, feeling its way through the storm. Obadiah's hands ached from gripping the wheel. His eyes burned from staring into the dust. And then, through the murk, he saw something, a shape, dark and angular. Off to the right side of the highway, Obadiah hit the brakes and the Kenworth shuddered to a stop. He leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The shape resolved into a structure, a building, maybe a barn or a shed, and next to it, barely visible, a road. Not a paved road, a dirt track leading away from the highway. Obadiah grabbed his CB. "This is westbound NM9, mile 34. I've got a structure off the south side of the highway. Looks like a ranch access road. If anybody's monitoring, I'm pulling off to wait out this storm." No one responded. Obadiah put the truck in gear and turned onto the dirt road. The Kenworth suspension groaned as the wheels left the pavement and hit the rutted track. He drove slowly, following the road as it curved away from the highway and toward the structure. As he got closer, he could see it more clearly. It wasn't a barn, it was a house. An old ranch house, single-story, with a corrugated metal roof and a sagging porch. There were no lights on inside, no vehicles parked outside. The place looked abandoned. But next to the house was a metal pole barn, and next to that, a stock tank and a windmill. Signs of a working ranch, even if the house itself looked dead. Obadiah stopped the truck about 50 yards from the house and sat there, engine idling, debating his next move. The storm was getting worse. Visibility was down to maybe 5 feet now. He could hear the wind howling around the cab, hear the sand peppering the metal like birdshot. If he tried to keep driving, he'd end up in a ditch or worse. But if he stayed here, on private property, and someone came looking, he could get shot. Ranch owners in this part of New Mexico didn't take kindly to strangers showing up unannounced. Still, it was better than dying in a dust storm. Obadiah shut off the engine and climbed down from the cab. The wind hit him like a physical blow. He pulled his bandana up over his nose and mouth and squinted against the dust. He couldn't see the house anymore. Couldn't see his own truck. The world had contracted to a radius of about 3 feet. Everything beyond that a howling orange void. He stumbled forward, hands outstretched, until he collided with something solid, the porch railing. He grabbed it and pulled himself up onto the porch. The wooden boards creaked under his weight. He felt his way along the railing until he found the door. He knocked, loud enough to be heard over the wind. No answer. He knocked again. "Hello? Anybody home? I'm a trucker, got caught in the storm. Just looking for a place to wait it out." Nothing. Obadiah tried the door handle. It turned. The door swung open. Inside, the house was dark and silent. Obadiah hesitated. Every instinct told him not to go in, but the wind was tearing at his clothes now, the dust getting into his lungs despite the bandana. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The sudden absence of wind was disorienting. Obadiah stood in the darkness, breathing hard, listening. He could hear the storm outside, muffled now by the walls. He could hear the creak of the house settling, but nothing else. No voices, no footsteps, no indication that anyone lived here. He pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a living room. Old furniture covered in dust. A stone fireplace. Shelves lined with books and knickknacks. Everything looked like it hadn't been touched in years. But there was no thick layer of dirt, no cobwebs, no signs of total abandonment. Someone had been here. Maybe not recently, but not never. Obadiah moved deeper into the house. A hallway led to a kitchen. The sink was dry. The refrigerator was unplugged. Dishes sat clean in a drying rack. He opened a cabinet. Canned goods, beans, soup, vegetables. Enough food for someone planning to stay a while. Or someone who'd left in a hurry and never came back. Obadiah walked back through the living room and down another hallway. 2 bedrooms. One had a bed with no sheets. The other had a bed that was made, the blankets tucked in tight. Military corners. Obadiah recognized the style. His father had been in the army, had made his bed the same way every morning for 40 years. Next to the bed was a nightstand. On the nightstand was a photograph in a frame. Obadiah picked it up and shone his flashlight on it. The photo showed 2 men standing in front of a barn. Both were wearing cowboy hats and work shirts. One was older, maybe 60, with a weathered face and hard eyes. The other was younger, maybe 30, with a similar face. Father and son, Obadiah guessed. Behind them, partially visible in the photo, was a brand mark on the barn wall, a circle with a cross through it. Obadiah set the photo down and continued his search. In the closet he found clothes, men's clothes, work shirts, jeans, boots, all neatly arranged. And on the top shelf, a lockbox. Obadiah pulled it down and tried the latch. Locked, he shook it. Something heavy shifted inside. Papers, maybe, or something metal. He put the box back and closed the closet. Whatever secrets this house held, they weren't his business. He was just a trucker waiting out a storm. That's what he told himself. But as he walked back to the living room, he saw something that made him stop. On the floor, near the front door, was a dark stain. Obadiah crouched down and touched it with his finger. It was dry but tacky. He brought his finger close to his face. Even in the dim light, he could see the color. Rust brown. Blood. Not a lot of it. Just a few drops, like someone had tracked it in on their boots, or like someone had been bleeding and tried to leave. Obadiah stood up quickly. His heart was pounding now. He walked to the front window and looked out. Through the dust storm, he could barely see his truck, but he could see something else. Movement, a shape, darker than the dust, moving between his truck and the house. Obadiah killed his flashlight and stepped back from the window. He stood in the darkness, listening. The wind continued to howl. The house continued to creak. And then, over it all, he heard something else. The sound of the front door opening. Obadiah's hand went to his belt, where he kept a folding knife. He pulled it out and opened the blade as quietly as he could. The door swung wide and a figure stumbled inside. A man. He was clutching his side and breathing hard. Blood was seeping through his fingers. He took 2 steps into the living room and collapsed. Obadiah rushed forward. He knelt beside the man and rolled him onto his back. The man's eyes were half closed, his face pale. He was wearing a work shirt and jeans, both covered in dust and blood. "Hey," Obadiah said, shaking him gently. "Hey, can you hear me?" The man's eyes opened a little wider. He looked at Obadiah but didn't seem to see him. His lips moved. "Help," he whispered. "Please, help me." Obadiah pulled the man's hand away from his side and lifted his shirt. There was a wound there, a gunshot wound, entry hole just below the ribs. No exit wound that Obadiah could see. The bleeding was steady, but not gushing. The man might have minutes, or he might have hours. Hard to tell. "Who shot you?" Obadiah asked. The man didn't answer. His eyes closed again. Obadiah shook him. "Hey, Stay with me. Who shot you? Where did this happen?" The man's lips moved again. This time, Obadiah leaned closer to hear. "Briscoe," the man whispered. "Lyle Briscoe. He's coming. He's coming for me." Then the man passed out. Obadiah sat back on his heels, his mind racing. Lyle Briscoe. The name meant nothing to him, but it was clear this man was terrified of whoever that was. And if someone was coming, Obadiah needed to get out of here, fast. He stood up and looked around the room. His truck was 50 yards away. The storm was still raging outside. If he tried to carry this man to the truck, they'd both be blind and helpless. But if he left him here, the man would die. Obadiah made a decision. He bent down, grabbed the man under the arms, and started dragging him toward the door. The man groaned, but didn't wake up. Obadiah got him out onto the porch and down the steps. The wind hit them immediately, tearing at their clothes, filling the air with sand. Obadiah couldn't see anything. He just pulled the man forward, step by step, aiming for where he thought his truck was. His boot hit something metal. The truck's bumper, he'd made it. Obadiah opened the passenger door and, with great effort, lifted the unconscious man into the cab. The man slumped against the seat, head lolling to the side. Obadiah climbed into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. He sat there for a moment, breathing hard, covered in dust and blood. Then he turned the key, and the Kenworth roared to life. He had no idea where he was going. The storm was still too thick to see the road, but he knew one thing. He needed to get this man to a hospital, and he needed to do it before Lyle Briscoe, whoever the hell that was, showed up. Obadiah put the truck in gear and started driving. Slowly, blindly, through the dust and the wind, and somewhere behind him, in that empty ranch house, something waited. Something that had driven a man out into a storm with a bullet in his side. Something that was still hunting. Obadiah didn't know what it was, but he knew he didn't want to find out. He pressed the accelerator and drove into the storm, the injured man bleeding in the seat beside him and the road ahead completely invisible. He'd been driving for maybe 10 minutes when the man woke up. Obadiah heard him gasp and looked over. The man's eyes were wide, wild with pain and fear. "Where am I?" the man said, his voice hoarse. "In my truck," Obadiah said. "I'm getting you to a hospital. You've been shot. You need a doctor." The man shook his head violently. No hospital. He'll find me there. He'll finish it." "Who?" "Lyle Briscoe?" The man's eyes locked onto Obadiah's. "You know him? You said his name, before you passed out. Who is he?" The man leaned back against the seat, wincing. "He's the foreman of the ranch, the one we just left." Obadiah's hands tightened on the wheel. "Why did he shoot you?" The man was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. And now he's going to make sure I don't talk." Obadiah wanted to ask more questions, but the man's eyes closed again, and his breathing became shallow. Obadiah looked at the GPS. The storm was starting to thin. He could see maybe 20 feet ahead now, and according to the GPS, the nearest hospital was in Lordsburg, 40 miles north. 40 miles through back roads and open desert. 40 miles with a dying man and someone named Lyle Briscoe hunting them. Obadiah reached for his CB radio. He needed to call for help. Police, ambulance, somebody. But before he could key the mic, a new voice crackled through the speaker. A man's voice, deep, calm. "Obadiah Kincannon, I know you're listening. I know you've got him, and I know where you're going." Obadiah's blood ran cold. He grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" The voice came back. "This is Lyle Briscoe, and you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Obadiah stared at the CB radio like it was a rattlesnake coiled on his dashboard. Lyle Briscoe's voice still echoed in the cab, that calm, measured tone that promised violence without raising a decibel. Obadiah keyed the mic with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "I don't know what you think is happening here, but I've got an injured man who needs medical attention. I'm taking him to a hospital, that's all." Static hissed for 3 seconds. Then Briscoe's voice returned, still unhurried, still certain. "You're driving a white Kenworth T680 with a reefer unit. Colorado plates. DOT number 28476X5. You picked up a load of produce in Las Cruces this morning at 6:47 a.m. Your delivery window closes at midnight tonight in Douglas. You're 43 years old. You live in Deming. You've got a sister in Albuquerque and a niece who just started college at NMSU. You want me to keep going, or are you starting to understand how much trouble you're in?" Obadiah's mouth went dry. The wounded man beside him groaned softly, still unconscious, blood seeping through the makeshift pressure bandage Obadiah had fashioned from a shop rag. "How do you know all that?" "I know everything that moves through this county," Briscoe said. "Every truck, every car, every person who thinks they can just drive through without anybody noticing. This is my territory, Kincannon, has been for 20 years. And the man bleeding in your truck, he made the mistake of thinking he could take something that doesn't belong to him. Now you're making the same mistake." Obadiah glanced at the wounded man. Even unconscious, his face was tight with pain, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air from the AC. "He needs a doctor. Whatever he did, whatever you think he did, that's between you and him. I'm just trying to save his life." "Noble," Briscoe said. "Stupid, but noble. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pull over. You're going to leave him on the side of the road. And you're going to drive away. Do that, and you'll make your delivery window. You'll go home tonight. You'll see your family again. But if you keep driving toward Lordsburg, if you try to get him to that hospital, you won't make it. I promise you that." The line went dead. Obadiah tried to respond, but the channel was empty now. He switched frequencies, tried Channel 9, tried several others, nothing. Briscoe had said what he wanted to say and disappeared. The storm was thinning out now. Obadiah could see maybe 50 yards ahead, the road emerging from the dust like a dark ribbon unfurling. He checked his mirrors. Nothing behind him yet, but that didn't mean much. The GPS showed he was on County Road 338, a 2-lane strip of asphalt that cut north through ranch land toward the highway that would take him to Lordsburg. 28 miles to go. The wounded man stirred, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at Obadiah, then down at his side where the blood had soaked through his shirt and the shop rag. "How bad?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Bad enough," Obadiah said. "You need a hospital. There's one in Lordsburg. We'll be there in maybe 30 minutes if this storm clears." The man shook his head weakly. "He'll stop you, Briscoe. He's got people everywhere. Sheriff's Department, Highway Patrol, he owns half this county." "Who are you?" Obadiah asked. "Why does he want you dead?" The man closed his eyes. "Doesn't matter. What matters is you need to leave me. He's right. You keep going, he'll kill us both." Obadiah kept his eyes on the road. "I'm not leaving you. You don't understand," the man said, his voice getting weaker. "Briscoe isn't just some ranch foreman. He's running something bigger, something that if people knew about, if it got out, it would bring federal attention down on this whole area. That's why he can't let me get to a hospital, because I'll talk, and once I talk, it's over for him." "What's he running?" The man coughed, a wet, painful sound. "Human trafficking. He uses the ranch as a way station. People coming north across the border. They get picked up, brought to the ranch, held there until transport comes, sometimes for days, sometimes weeks. And if anyone causes problems, if anyone tries to leave or doesn't pay what they're supposed to pay, Briscoe handles it. That's his job. That's what he does. Obadiah felt his stomach turn. And you saw this? That's why he shot you? I work for him, the man said. Worked for him. I was supposed to be watching a group that came through last night. But one of them, a kid, maybe 16, he tried to run. Briscoe caught him, and what he did to that kid. The man's voice broke. I couldn't just stand there. I tried to stop him. That's when he shot me. Obadiah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He thought about his niece, about the fact that she was barely older than the kid this man was describing. He thought about pulling over, about leaving this wounded man on the roadside like Briscoe had suggested. He thought about his delivery window, his paycheck, his quiet life in Deming that didn't involve ranch foremen who trafficked human beings and shot people who got in their way. And then he pressed the accelerator a little harder. We're going to Lordsburg, Obadiah said, and you're going to tell the police everything you just told me. The man opened his eyes and looked at Obadiah with something like gratitude, or maybe pity. You're a good man, Kincannon, better than me. But good men don't last long out here. The CB crackled again. This time it wasn't Briscoe's voice. It was a woman's voice, young, with the clipped efficiency of someone used to handling emergencies. This is Hidalgo County Dispatch to any units in the vicinity of County Road 338. We have a report of a stolen vehicle, white Kenworth commercial truck, possibly involved in a kidnapping. All units respond. Obadiah grabbed the mic. This is not a stolen vehicle. This is my truck. And this is not a kidnapping. I have an injured man who needs medical assistance. The dispatcher's voice came back immediately. Identify yourself, please. What's your location? Before Obadiah could respond, a new voice cut in. Male, authoritative. Dispatch, this is Deputy Haverly. I'm 8 miles south of the suspect vehicle. I'll intercept. Obadiah recognized the name. Quentin Haverly. One of the deputies he'd met a few years back at a way station, back when he was doing a routine inspection. Good guy, as far as Obadiah remembered. Or at least, he'd seemed like a good guy. But the wounded man had said Briscoe owned half the sheriff's department. Obadiah keyed the mic. Dispatch, I'm not a suspect. My name is Obadiah Kincannon. I'm a commercial driver. I found an injured man during the dust storm, and I'm transporting him to the hospital in Lordsburg. That's all. The dispatcher's voice was cautious now. Sir, we need you to pull over and wait for law enforcement to arrive. Negative, Obadiah said. This man has a gunshot wound. He's losing blood. Every minute counts. Sir, if you don't comply, you will be charged with failure to yield and evading law enforcement. Pull over now. Obadiah looked at the wounded man. The man was watching him, his face pale, his breathing shallow. Don't stop, the man whispered. Please, if they get me, I'm dead. Obadiah made his decision. He released the mic and turned off the CB radio. The sudden silence in the cab was startling. No static, no voices, just the rumble of the diesel engine and the hiss of the tires on wet asphalt. The storm had left the road slick with mud and debris. Obadiah checked his mirrors. Still nothing behind him, but that wouldn't last. Deputy Haverly was 8 miles back. Maybe less now. And Lordsburg was still 23 miles ahead. The Kenworth was fast for a semi, but it wasn't faster than a patrol car. Obadiah's mind raced through his options. He could pull over, flag down the deputy, try to explain. But if Briscoe really did own law enforcement in this county, that explanation would end with both of them dead or disappeared. He could try to outrun them, but that was insane. You didn't outrun cops in an 18-wheeler, not on open roads. not in New Mexico. Or he could try something else, something that would buy them time, something risky but possible. Up ahead, Obadiah saw a turnoff. Not a road exactly, more like a ranch access trail that cut east toward a cluster of low hills. The GPS showed it as unnamed, unpaved, leading nowhere in particular, but it would get them off the main road. It would make them harder to track. Obadiah took the turn. The Kenworth's suspension groaned as the wheels left the asphalt and hit the dirt trail. The trailer fishtailed slightly, the reefer unit bouncing over ruts, but Obadiah corrected and kept moving. The trail was narrow, barely wide enough for the truck, mesquite branches scraping against the sides of the trailer. The wounded man braced himself against the dashboard. "Where are you going?" "Buying us time," Obadiah said. "If we stay on the main road, they'll catch us in 5 minutes. This way, maybe we've got 10. And then what? I don't know yet." The trail climbed gradually, winding between rock outcroppings and stands of juniper. The dust storm had passed completely now, the sky clearing to reveal the last light of dusk. Obadiah could see the hills ahead, dark shapes against the fading orange horizon, and he could see something else. Behind them, maybe a mile back, the flashing red and blue lights of a patrol car. Deputy Haverly had found them. Obadiah pushed the Kenworth as hard as he dared on the rough terrain. The speedometer read 30 miles per hour, which felt like recklessness on this kind of surface. The trailer swayed and bucked. Something inside the reefer unit was shifting, the produce load probably getting destroyed, but Obadiah didn't care about that anymore. The wounded man coughed again, harder this time. Blood flecked his lips. "Listen," he said, his voice fading. "If I don't make it, you need to tell someone. Not the local cops, federal, DEA, or Border Patrol. Tell them about the ranch. Tell them about Briscoe. Tell them there are people there right now, locked in the barn, waiting." "You're going to make it," Obadiah said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. The patrol car was gaining. Obadiah could see it clearly now, a white SUV with Hidalgo County Sheriff markings. The light bar on top was flashing, but there was no siren. Not yet. The SUV was maybe half a mile back, moving faster than the Kenworth, eating up the distance. Obadiah's options were running out. The trail was getting narrower. Up ahead, it looked like it might dead end at a fence line. If he got trapped, it was over. And then he saw it. Off to the left, barely visible in the failing light, a structure. A small building, maybe a line shack or an old hunting cabin. And next to it, a different trail, one that branched off and seemed to continue north. Obadiah made the turn. The Kenworth tilted dangerously as it took the corner, the trailer's weight pulling it toward the edge of the trail where the ground dropped away into a shallow arroyo. For a second, Obadiah thought they were going over. Then the wheels caught and the truck straightened out. Behind them, the patrol car made the same turn, but it was going too fast. Obadiah watched in the mirror as the SUV's rear end slid out, the vehicle spinning sideways, kicking up a plume of dust. The SUV came to a stop, facing the wrong direction. Its headlights pointed back the way it had come. Obadiah didn't wait to see what happened next. He kept driving. The new trail was even rougher than the last one. More rocks, deeper ruts. But it was heading north, and that was the direction he needed to go. The wounded man was unconscious again, his head lolling against the seat, his breathing so shallow Obadiah had to watch his chest to make sure he was still alive. 10 minutes later, the trail opened up onto a gravel road. Not much better than the trail, but at least it was wider, more stable. Obadiah turned north and accelerated. The GPS was useless now. They'd gone so far off the marked roads that the screen just showed blank space with a flashing, "No route available" message. But Obadiah could see lights in the distance. A town, maybe Lordsburg, maybe somewhere else. It didn't matter. As long as there were people, there was a chance. He drove toward the lights, the Kenworth bouncing and rattling, the wounded man dying beside him, and somewhere behind them, Lyle Briscoe's people closing in. The town turned out to be a truck stop. Not Lordsburg, not even close. It was a small cluster of buildings huddled around a pair of diesel pumps, maybe 20 miles east of where Obadiah thought he was. But there were lights, and vehicles, and most importantly, there was a payphone mounted on the outside wall of the main building. Obadiah pulled the Kenworth into the lot and parked near the phone. He looked at the wounded man, still breathing, still unconscious. Obadiah climbed down from the cab and walked to the payphone. His legs were shaking. His hands were shaking. He picked up the receiver and dialed 911. The operator answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? I need an ambulance, Obadiah said. I'm at a truck stop on, I don't know the exact location. Somewhere east of Lordsburg. I have a man with a gunshot wound. He's critical. Stay on the line, sir. I'm dispatching EMS now. Can you describe the location more specifically? Obadiah looked around. There was a sign above the main building. Desert Rose Truck Stop, he read. On Route 90, I think. Understood. EMS is en route. Estimated arrival, 15 minutes. Can you tell me what happened? Obadiah started to explain, but then he saw headlights turning into the lot. A white SUV. Hidalgo County Sheriff. Obadiah's heart sank. Deputy Haverly had found them. The SUV pulled up next to the Kenworth and stopped. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a tan uniform and a cowboy hat. He had a pistol on his hip and a radio clipped to his shoulder. He looked at Obadiah, then at the phone in Obadiah's hand. Obadiah Kincannon? The deputy asked. Obadiah nodded slowly. That's me. I'm Deputy Quentin Haverly. I need you to hang up the phone and step away from the vehicle. There's a man in my truck, Obadiah said. He's been shot. He needs help. I know, Haverly said. Hang up the phone, now. Obadiah looked at the phone, then at the deputy. Haverly's hand was resting on his pistol, not drawing it, but making the threat clear. Obadiah hung up the phone. Step away from the truck, Haverly said again. Obadiah took a few steps back. His mind was racing. If Haverly worked for Briscoe, this was where it ended. No witnesses, no hospital, just 2 bodies left in the desert. But Haverly didn't draw his weapon. Instead, he walked past Obadiah to the Kenworth and looked inside the cab. He saw the wounded man and muttered something under his breath. This the guy Briscoe's looking for? Haverly asked. Obadiah didn't answer. Haverly turned to face him. I asked you a question. I don't know who he is, Obadiah said. I found him in the storm. He was shot. I'm trying to get him to a hospital. Haverly studied Obadiah for a long moment. Then he reached for his radio. Obadiah tensed, expecting him to call it in, to tell Briscoe where they were. But instead, Haverly turned the radio off and clipped it back to his shoulder. Get back in your truck, Haverly said. Obadiah stared at him. What? Get in your truck and drive to Lordsburg Regional Hospital. It's 18 miles north on Route 90. I'll follow you. If anybody tries to stop you, I'll handle it. Why are you helping me? Haverly's expression hardened. Because Lyle Briscoe is a piece of human garbage, and I've been waiting a long time for someone to give me a reason to take him down. Now move. That man doesn't have much time. Obadiah didn't need to be told twice. He climbed back into the Kenworth, fired up the engine, and pulled out of the truck stop. In his mirror, he saw Haverly get into the SUV and follow. They drove north on Route 90, the Kenworth pushing 70, the patrol car right behind them with its lights flashing. And for the first time since he'd found the wounded man in that empty ranch house, Obadiah allowed himself to believe they might actually make it. The hospital appeared after 12 minutes of hard driving. A low cluster of buildings surrounded by parking lots, illuminated by sodium lights that turned everything the color of old brass. Obadiah pulled into the emergency entrance and stopped. Medical staff were already coming out, pushing a gurney, alerted by the 911 call. Haverly was out of his SUV immediately, helping them open the Kenworth's passenger door and ease the wounded man onto the gurney. The man's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. He looked at Obadiah and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Then they wheeled him inside, and he was gone. Obadiah stood in the parking lot covered in dust and blood, his legs barely holding him up. Haverly walked over and stood beside him. "You did good," Haverly said. "That man would be dead if it wasn't for you." "Who is he?" Obadiah asked. "His name's not important. What's important is what he knows. And now that he's in federal custody, he can talk." "Federal custody?" Haverly nodded. "I made some calls on the way here. DEA, Border Patrol. They've been investigating Briscoe for 2 years. This is the break they've been waiting for." Obadiah looked at the hospital. "What happens now?" "Now," Haverly said, "you go home. You forget this ever happened, and you let us handle Lyle Briscoe." Obadiah Kincannon sat in the hospital waiting room for 2 hours before anyone came to talk to him. The plastic chair was uncomfortable, and the fluorescent lights made everything look washed out and unreal. His clothes were still covered in dust and dried blood. Other people in the waiting room gave him wide berth, choosing seats on the opposite side of the room. He didn't blame them. He looked like he'd crawled out of a grave. Deputy Haverly had disappeared into the emergency department with the medical staff, and Obadiah hadn't seen him since. A nurse had taken Obadiah's statement, asked if he needed medical attention himself, and then left him alone with a cup of bad coffee and a clipboard full of forms he didn't know how to fill out. He didn't know the wounded man's name, didn't know his date of birth, or his social security number, or his insurance information. All he knew was that the man had been shot by Lyle Briscoe, and that somewhere out there in the New Mexico night, Briscoe was still looking for them both. At 9:47 p.m., a woman in scrubs came through the double doors that led to the treatment area. She was in her mid-40s with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, and the kind of face that had seen too many emergencies to be shocked by anything anymore. She scanned the waiting room until her eyes found Obadiah. She walked over and sat down in the chair next to him. "You're the one who brought him in?" she asked. Her voice was flat, professional, with just a hint of exhaustion underneath. "Yes, ma'am," Obadiah said. "How is he?" "Alive. Barely. The bullet entered below his ribs, punctured his liver, and lodged near his spine. We've stabilized him for now, but he needs surgery. We're prepping an OR." She paused. "He's asking for you." Obadiah blinked. "Me? Why?" "I don't know, but he's insistent. Says he needs to talk to you before he goes under. Says it's important." She stood up. "I'm Minna Treadwell, charge nurse in the ER. If you're coming back, you need to come now. We don't have much time." Obadiah followed Minna Treadwell through the double doors and into the emergency department. The smell hit him immediately. Disinfectant and blood and something else, something chemical and sharp that he couldn't identify. They walked past curtained-off bays where voices murmured and machines beeped. At the end of the hall, Minna stopped at a closed door. "He's in here. You've got 5 minutes. After that, he goes to surgery." She opened the door. The wounded man was lying on a bed, hooked up to what looked like a dozen different machines. IV lines ran into both arms. A ventilator mask covered his nose and mouth. His skin was the color of the old newspaper, but his eyes were open, and when he saw Obadiah, he raised one hand weakly. Obadiah walked to the bedside. "Hey," he said, not knowing what else to say. The man pulled down the ventilator mask. His voice was so faint Obadiah had to lean in to hear it. "They're going to ask you questions. Federal agents. About what I told you, about the ranch." "I know," Obadiah said. "I'll tell them." "No." The man shook his head, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "You can't just tell them. Briscoe has people everywhere. Law enforcement, border patrol, even some federal agents. If you talk to the wrong person, you'll end up dead." Obadiah felt a chill run down his spine. "Then, who do I talk to?" The man closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "There's a woman, DEA agent. Her name is—" He stopped, coughing. Blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. Minna Treadwell stepped forward, checking the monitors. "We need to get him to surgery, now." "Wait," the man said, grabbing Obadiah's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen, the people at the ranch, the ones Briscoe is holding, they're not just waiting for transport. Some of them have been there for weeks, and Briscoe's been using them for—" He coughed again, harder. More blood. Minna hit a button on the wall and immediately 2 other nurses rushed in. They started unhooking monitors, preparing to move the bed. "What's he been using them for?" Obadiah asked urgently. But the man's eyes had closed. His hand went slack. The nurses wheeled him out of the room at a run, Minna Treadwell following close behind, barking orders. Obadiah stood alone in the empty room, the smell of blood still hanging in the air, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into. He walked back to the waiting room. Deputy Haverly was there now, talking on his cell phone. When he saw Obadiah, he ended the call and walked over. "They're taking him to surgery?" Haverly asked. Obadiah nodded. "He said Briscoe has people inside law enforcement. Said I can't trust anyone." Haverly's jaw tightened. "He's not wrong. Briscoe's been paying off deputies and border agents for years. That's why we've never been able to touch him. Every time we get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. It's like trying to grab smoke." "So what do I do?" Obadiah asked. "I can't just go home. Briscoe knows who I am. He knows where I live." Haverly looked around the waiting room, then gestured for Obadiah to follow him. They walked outside into the parking lot, away from the entrance, away from the lights. When they were alone, Haverly spoke in a low voice. "There's a federal task force that's been building a case against Briscoe. Real task force, not compromised. I've been feeding them information for 6 months. The man you brought in, he's the first witness they've had who can testify to what's actually happening at that ranch. But he's also a target now, and so are you." "What's Briscoe doing out there?" Obadiah asked. The man said something about Briscoe using the people he's holding. Using them for what? Haverly was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was grim. "Organ harvesting." Obadiah felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. "What?" "The people who cross the border. The ones who get picked up and taken to Briscoe's ranch. Some of them never leave, not alive, anyway. Briscoe's been working with a network that traffics organs. Kidneys, mostly. Hearts, livers. They take them from people who won't be missed. People with no papers, no family in this country. People who are invisible." Obadiah thought he was going to be sick. "How long has this been going on?" "Years, maybe longer. We don't know the full extent of it yet. But the man in there, he was part of it. He helped run the operation, until he couldn't anymore." Haverly pulled out a business card and handed it to Obadiah. This is a federal prosecutor. She's clean. She's the one running the task force. You need to call her tomorrow morning. Tell her everything you saw, everything you heard. She'll protect you." Obadiah looked at the card. The name printed on it meant nothing to him. "And in the meantime, what do I do tonight?" "You don't go home," Haverly said. "You find a motel somewhere far from here. You pay cash. You don't use your phone. You don't contact anyone. And you wait for her to call you back." "What about my truck? My delivery?" "Your delivery can wait. Your life can't." Haverly looked back at the hospital. "I need to stay here. Make sure nobody gets to our witness before he comes out of surgery. But you need to leave, now, before anyone else shows up asking questions." Obadiah started walking toward his Kenworth. He'd only taken a few steps when Haverly called out, "Kincannon, that man in there, the one you saved. He's done terrible things, but he's trying to make it right. Don't let that be for nothing." Obadiah nodded and kept walking. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and pulled out of the hospital parking lot. He had no idea where he was going. All he knew was that he needed to put distance between himself and Lordsburg. He drove west on Route 90, back the way he'd come, but he didn't take the turn toward NM9. Instead, he stayed on 90, heading toward Silver City. The night was clear now. The storm completely passed, and the stars overhead were so bright they looked artificial. Obadiah's mind was racing, organ harvesting, human trafficking, a ranch foreman who could reach into law enforcement and federal agencies like they were his own private security force. Obadiah had spent 20 years driving trucks up and down these highways, and he'd always thought of himself as someone who knew this country. But he'd been wrong. He'd been driving across the surface while underneath, hidden from view, something monstrous was happening. At 11:23 p.m., Obadiah pulled into a truck stop outside of Silver City. He parked in the back of the lot, away from the lights, and shut off the engine. He sat there in the darkness, trying to decide what to do next. His phone had been buzzing for the last hour. Missed calls from his dispatcher, text messages asking where he was, asking about the delivery, asking if everything was okay. Obadiah ignored them all. He couldn't think about produce deliveries right now. Couldn't think about schedules and load windows and all the mundane concerns that had made up his life until this morning. He thought about the wounded man lying in surgery. Thought about the people still trapped at Briscoe's ranch, waiting to have their organs cut out and sold. Thought about the fact that he could have just driven past that ranch house, could have waited out the storm on the highway, could have never stopped to help. And some part of him wished he had. Wished he'd never opened that door, never found that man bleeding on the floor, never gotten involved. But another part of him, the part that had been raised by his father to believe that you helped people in trouble no matter what, knew he'd done the right thing. Even if it cost him everything. Even if Lyle Briscoe came for him. Even if he never made it home. Obadiah's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello?" A man's voice. Not Briscoe this time. Someone else. Younger, nervous. "Obadiah Kincannon? Who's asking?" "My name doesn't matter. What matters is that Lyle Briscoe knows where you are. He's got trackers on your truck. He's known your location since you left Lordsburg. He's on his way to you right now." Obadiah's blood went cold. He looked out the windshield at the dark parking lot. Nothing moved. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I worked for him, same as the guy you brought to the hospital. I can't do this anymore. But if you don't move right now, he's going to find you. And when he does, you're dead." The line went dead. Obadiah sat frozen for about 3 seconds. Then he was moving. He jumped down from the cab and went to the trailer, checking the undercarriage, the wheel wells, Anywhere someone could have hidden a GPS tracker. His flashlight beam swept across metal and rubber and dirt. And then he found it. Stuck to the inside of the rear mudflap housing, a small, black box about the size of a matchbook. A magnetic tracker. Obadiah ripped it off and threw it as far as he could into the scrub brush at the edge of the parking lot. Then he climbed back into the cab and started the engine. He was pulling out of the lot when he saw headlights turning in from the highway. A black pickup truck, lifted, with off-road lights on the roof. It drove slowly through the lot, searching. Obadiah killed his headlights and accelerated, rolling through the darkness, navigating by the ambient light from the truck stop buildings. He made it to the exit and turned onto the highway heading north. In his mirror, he saw the black pickup reverse direction and start following. No lights, just a dark shape moving fast. Obadiah switched on his headlights and punched the accelerator. The Kenworth responded, the engine roaring, the speedometer climbing past 70. The pickup was gaining. Obadiah could see it clearly now, maybe 200 yards back, closing the distance. And he could see something else, a figure in the passenger seat, leaning out the window, holding something. Obadiah swerved into the left lane just as the rear window of his cab exploded. Glass showered everywhere. They were shooting at him. Obadiah ducked low, keeping one hand on the wheel, staying in the left lane. Another shot. This one punched through the trailer, the sound like a metal drum being hit with a hammer. Obadiah grabbed his CB radio and keyed the mic. "This is a commercial vehicle on Route 90 northbound near Silver City. I'm being shot at. I need police assistance. Repeat, shots fired, need immediate assistance." Static answered him. He tried again. Nothing. Either the CB was damaged or Briscoe was jamming the signal again. Up ahead, Obadiah saw a sign. Gila National Forest, next exit. The exit was a quarter-mile away. Obadiah made a decision. He took the exit, the Kenworth tilting dangerously as it took the turn at 60 miles per hour. The trailer swayed, the tires screaming, but it held. The black pickup took the same exit, now only 100 yards back. The road climbed into the foothills, narrow and winding, with steep drop-offs on the right side and sheer rock faces on the left. Not a place for a truck. Not a place for high-speed pursuit. But Obadiah didn't have a choice. He kept his foot on the accelerator, the Kenworth barely staying in its lane, the trailer fishtailing on every turn. Another shot. This one took out his passenger side mirror. Obadiah could hear the pickup's engine now, a high-pitched whine that meant it was redlining, pushing as hard as it could. He checked his driver's side mirror. The pickup was 50 yards back. And in the glow of the Kenworth's taillights, Obadiah could see the shooter clearly. It was a man, lean, wearing a cowboy hat, holding a rifle, and Obadiah knew with absolute certainty that it was Lyle Briscoe himself. The road ahead curved sharply to the left. Obadiah took the turn, the trailer scraping against the rock face, metal screaming against stone. The pickup took the turn tighter, gaining ground. 40 yards now. Briscoe leaned out the window and fired again. The shot hit the trailer's reefer unit, and immediately the temperature alarm started wailing. The refrigeration was damaged. Obadiah's entire load was going to spoil, but that was the least of his problems. The road straightened out briefly and Obadiah saw what lay ahead. A bridge. Old. Narrow. Wooden planks over a ravine. There were warning signs. Weight limit 10 tons. The Kenworth weighed 40 tons loaded. Obadiah had about 5 seconds to decide. He could stop, get out, take his chances on foot, or he could trust that the bridge was stronger than the sign claimed, that some engineer had built in a safety margin, that maybe, just maybe, the bridge would hold. Obadiah didn't slow down. The Kenworth hit the bridge at 40 miles per hour. The wooden planks groaned, some cracked. Obadiah could feel the entire structure flexing under the weight, could hear the support beams protesting. But the bridge held. Behind him, the black pickup hit the bridge at full speed, and the bridge, weakened by the Kenworth's passage, collapsed. Obadiah saw it in his mirror. The pickup's front wheels dropped through broken planks. The truck pitched forward, nose-diving, the rear end flipping over. It tumbled into the ravine, disappearing into the darkness below. There was a moment of silence, then a distant crash, then nothing. Obadiah stopped the Kenworth on the far side of the bridge and sat there, breathing hard, his hands shaking on the wheel. He looked back at the broken bridge. No movement, no lights, no sign of anyone climbing out of the wreckage. Lyle Briscoe was gone. Obadiah picked up his phone and dialed 911. This time, when the operator answered, he told her everything. The police came 40 minutes later. State troopers, local sheriff's deputies, even a helicopter that swept the ravine with a searchlight looking for survivors. Obadiah sat in his Kenworth, engine off, watching the emergency vehicles arrive one after another, their lights turning the night into a strobing carnival of red and blue. A trooper took his statement. Then another trooper asked the same questions. Then a detective arrived and asked everything all over again. Obadiah told them the truth. About the dust storm. About finding the wounded man. About Lyle Briscoe and the ranch and the GPS tracker. About the pursuit and the shooting and the bridge. He showed them the bullet holes in his truck. Showed them where the rear window had been blown out. Showed them the damaged reefer unit that was still wailing its alarm into the night. The detective listened to everything without interrupting. When Obadiah was finished, the detective closed his notebook and said, "You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Kincannon." Obadiah didn't feel lucky. He felt exhausted and scared and like he'd aged 10 years in the last 12 hours. They brought a tow truck to move Obadiah's Kenworth off the damaged bridge approach. The driver, a man in his 60s with oil-stained coveralls, shook his head as he hooked up the chains. "This bridge has been condemned for 2 years," he said. "State was supposed to tear it down last summer. Guess they never got around to it." Obadiah looked at the sagging structure, at the gaps where planks had fallen through, at the support beams that looked like they were held together by rust and prayer. He'd driven across that, at 40 miles per hour, with a 40-ton load. The fact that he was still alive didn't seem real. The detective came back around 2:15 a.m. "We found the vehicle," he said, "at the bottom of the ravine. It's pretty mangled. Fire department is working on extracting the occupants now." "Are they alive?" Obadiah asked. The detective's expression was unreadable. "We don't know yet, but even if they are, they're in bad shape." He paused. "The vehicle is registered to a ranch about 60 miles south of here. The Circle Cross Ranch. Ever heard of it?" Obadiah shook his head. "That's Lyle Briscoe's ranch," the detective said. "Or it was. Looks like we're going to have a lot of questions for Mr. Briscoe, assuming he makes it." They let Obadiah go at 3:30 a.m. The tow truck driver offered to haul the Kenworth to a repair shop in Silver City, but Obadiah declined. The truck was drivable, barely. The rear window was gone and the reefer unit was dead, which meant his entire load of produce was spoiling, but the engine ran and the wheels turned, and that was all Obadiah cared about right now. He just wanted to go home. He drove south on Route 90, retracing the route he'd taken 12 hours earlier, back when this had just been another delivery run, back when the worst thing he'd had to worry about was making his delivery window. The sun was starting to rise when he reached the outskirts of Deeming. The desert turned gold and pink in the early light, the kind of beautiful sunrise that travel magazines put on their covers. Obadiah barely noticed. He pulled into his driveway at 5:47 a.m. His house looked exactly the same as it had when he'd left yesterday afternoon. Small, quiet, safe. He sat in the truck for a long moment, not quite believing he was home. Then he climbed down and walked to the front door. His wife was awake. She must have heard the truck pull up. She opened the door before Obadiah could reach for his keys, and when she saw him, her expression went from relief to horror in about 2 seconds. "Oh my God," she said. "Obadiah, what happened to you?" Obadiah looked down at himself. His clothes were still covered in dried blood. His face was streaked with dust and sweat. His hands were shaking. He realized he must look like he'd been through a war. "Long story," he said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, hollow. She pulled him inside and made him sit at the kitchen table. She brought him water, then coffee, then started asking questions. Obadiah told her everything. About the storm, the ranch house, the wounded man, Lyle Briscoe, the hospital, the pursuit. All of it. When he was finished, his wife sat across from him, her face pale. "You could have been killed," she said. "I know. You could have just kept driving. You didn't have to stop at that ranch. You didn't have to help that man. I know that too." She reached across the table and took his hand. "But you did, because that's who you are." Obadiah squeezed her hand but didn't say anything. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who'd stumbled into something terrible and barely crawled out alive. His phone rang. Obadiah looked at the screen. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but his wife nodded at him. He picked up. "Hello. Mr. Kincannon, this is Minna Treadwell, from Lordsburg Regional Hospital. I'm calling about the patient you brought in last night." Obadiah sat up straighter. "How is he?" "He made it through surgery. He's in ICU now, stable but critical. He's asking for you again." Obadiah closed his eyes. "What does he want?" "He says he needs to tell you something. Something he didn't get to say before. The doctors say he might not make it through the next 24 hours. If you want to talk to him, you should come soon." Obadiah looked at his wife. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I'll be there in 2 hours," he said. He ended the call. His wife stood up. "I'm coming with you." Obadiah started to protest, but she cut him off. "Don't argue. You're not driving back to Lordsburg by yourself, not after everything that just happened." They took her car, a 10-year-old Honda Accord that felt strangely normal after the chaos of the night before. Obadiah sat in the passenger seat and watched the desert roll past. His wife drove in silence for the first hour, then said, "Do you think they'll catch the others? The people who worked with Briscoe?" "I don't know," Obadiah said. "The detective said there's a federal task force investigating. Maybe they'll get them. And if they don't?" Obadiah didn't have an answer for that. They reached Lordsburg at 8:15 a.m. The hospital looked different in daylight. Less menacing. Just another building in a small town where bad things sometimes happened. Minna Treadwell met them in the ICU waiting room. She looked like she'd been working all night, her scrubs rumpled, her eyes tired. But she managed a small smile when she saw Obadiah. "He's awake," she said, "but he's very weak. You'll only have a few minutes." She led them down a hallway to a room with a closed door. "Your wife will need to wait here," Minna said. "Only one visitor at a time in ICU." Obadiah's wife nodded and squeezed his arm. "I'll be right here." Obadiah followed Minna into the room. The wounded man looked even worse than he had the night before. His skin was gray, his lips cracked and dry. Tubes and wires ran from his body to machines that beeped and hummed. But his eyes were open, and when he saw Obadiah, he tried to smile. "You came," the man whispered. Obadiah walked to the bedside. "The nurse said you wanted to talk to me." The man nodded weakly. "I need to tell you, before I die, about the ranch." "The police know about the ranch," Obadiah said. "They're investigating." "You don't have to—" "No," the man interrupted. "You don't understand. The ranch isn't the only place. Briscoe was just one part of a network. There are others, other ranches, other people running the same operation. If Briscoe is dead, they'll just find someone else to take his place." Obadiah felt his stomach sink. "How many others?" "I don't know. Dozens, maybe. Spread out across New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, everywhere along the border." The man coughed, a wet, painful sound. "That's why I needed to tell you. Because if something happens to me, someone needs to know. Someone needs to keep pushing, keep investigating." Mina Treadwell stepped forward, checking the monitors. "His blood pressure is dropping. We need to wrap this up." The man grabbed Obadiah's wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Promise me," he said. "Promise me you'll tell them, the federal agents. Tell them about the network. Don't let this die with me." "I promise," Obadiah said. The man released his grip and closed his eyes. "Good, that's good." His breathing became more labored. The monitors started beeping faster. Minna ushered Obadiah out of the room. "He needs to rest now. We'll call you if there's any change." Obadiah walked back to the waiting room where his wife was sitting. She stood up when she saw him. "What did he say?" "That it's bigger than we thought. Bigger than just one ranch. Bigger than just Briscoe." She took his hand. "Then we tell someone. The police, the FBI, whoever will listen." "And what if they already know?" Obadiah said. "What if they've known for years and they just don't care?" "Then we make them care," his wife said firmly. "Come on, let's go home." They drove back to Deming in silence. Obadiah stared out the window, thinking about everything the wounded man had said, about the network, about the other ranches, about the people who were still out there trapped, waiting to be exploited. He thought about the fact that he was just a truck driver, that he had no power, no connections, no way to make anyone listen to him. But he also thought about the fact that he'd saved one man's life. That one man was now talking to federal investigators, telling them everything he knew. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could do. Save one person. Tell one truth. And hope that it mattered. They reached Deming at 10:30 a.m. Obadiah's wife pulled into the driveway and shut off the engine. They sat there for a moment, neither one moving. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. Obadiah looked at his house, at his truck parked in the driveway, damaged and blood-stained, at the life he'd built over 2 decades that suddenly felt fragile and temporary. "I'm going to fix my truck," he said. "And then I'm going to make a phone call." 3 days later, Obadiah sat in a federal building in Las Cruces, talking to 2 FBI agents and a prosecutor from the Department of Justice. He told them everything. About the wounded man, about Lyle Briscoe, about the ranch and the network and everything he'd seen and heard. The agents listened without interrupting, taking notes, recording everything. When Obadiah was finished, the prosecutor leaned forward. "Mr. Kincannon, what you've told us corroborates information we've been gathering for months. The man you rescued, he's been cooperating fully. Between his testimony and yours, we have enough to start making arrests." "What about Briscoe?" Obadiah asked. "Is he alive?" The prosecutor exchanged a glance with one of the agents. "Lyle Briscoe died 2 days ago. Never regained consciousness after the crash. But we've identified several of his associates. We're moving on them now." Obadiah felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. "What happens to me now?" Nothing, the prosecutor said. You go back to your life, you drive your truck. You forget this ever happened, we'll handle it from here. But Obadiah couldn't forget. Over the next few weeks, he tried to return to normal. He got his truck repaired, filed an insurance claim for the damaged load, started taking runs again. But every time he drove past that stretch of NM9, every time he saw a ranch house sitting alone in the desert, he thought about what might be happening inside. He thought about the people who were invisible, who crossed borders looking for a better life and ended up trapped in nightmares they couldn't escape. And he thought about the wounded man, whose name he still didn't know, who was recovering in a federal medical facility somewhere, preparing to testify. 1 month after the incident, Obadiah got a call from Minna Treadwell. I thought you'd want to know, she said. The patient you brought in. He asked me to pass along a message. What is it? He said to tell you thank you, and that he's going to make sure what he knows counts for something. Obadiah thanked her and ended the call. He stood in his driveway looking out at the desert that stretched away in all directions. Somewhere out there, federal agents were raiding ranches, arresting people, shutting down the network. And it had all started because Obadiah Kincannon had pulled off the highway during a dust storm and decided to help a stranger. 2 months later, the news broke. Headlines about a major human trafficking and organ harvesting ring being dismantled across the Southwest. Dozens of arrests. Hundreds of victims freed. The articles didn't mention Obadiah's name, which was fine with him. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to know that it had mattered, that the choice he'd made that night had led to something good. He went back to driving, back to running loads up and down NM9, through the lonely stretches of desert where most people never stopped. But Obadiah stopped now. Every time he saw a ranch house, every time he saw a stranded vehicle, every time he saw someone who looked like they might need help, because he knew now what he'd always suspected, that the roads he drove every day weren't just routes on a map. They were arteries running through a landscape where terrible things happened just out of sight, where people disappeared and no one looked for them, where darkness thrived in the empty spaces between towns. And Obadiah Kincannon, truck driver, had learned that sometimes the most important thing you could do was refuse to look away, refuse to keep driving, refuse to pretend you didn't see. But the story didn't end there, because 3 months after Briscoe's death, Obadiah started noticing things. Small things. A car that seemed to follow him for too many miles. A man at a truck stop who watched him a little too carefully. A phone call that disconnected the moment he answered. He told himself it was paranoia, that he was seeing patterns where there were none. But then he came home one evening and found his front door unlocked. Nothing was missing. Nothing was disturbed. But someone had been inside. He knew it. Could feel it. His wife wanted to call the police. Obadiah said no, because he remembered what the wounded man had told him, that the network was bigger than just one ranch, that there were others. And if Obadiah had helped bring down part of that network, maybe someone wanted to make sure he didn't help bring down the rest. He started varying his routes, changing his schedule, checking his truck for trackers before every run. He bought a dash cam and installed it in his Kenworth, started carrying a pistol in his glove box, even though he'd never fired a gun at anyone in his life. And every night, before he went to sleep, he checked the locks on his doors and windows, checked his security system, made sure his phone was charged and within reach. Because Obadiah had learned something that night on NM9, something that would stay with him for the rest of his life, that doing the right thing didn't always lead to a happy ending, that sometimes it just led to more danger, more fear, more looking over your shoulder. But he also learned that he could live with that, could live with the fear and the uncertainty and the knowledge that someone might come for him someday, because the alternative was living with the knowledge that he'd driven past someone who needed help, that he'd looked away when it mattered most. And Obadiah Kincannon wasn't that kind of man. So he kept driving, kept watching, kept his phone charged and his doors locked and his eyes open for anyone who might need help. Because that's what you did. You kept moving forward, even when you were afraid. Even when you knew the darkness was still out there, waiting. You just kept driving. And Obadiah, as he pulled out of his driveway one cool November morning, with the sun rising over the desert and his wife waving from the doorway and another load waiting in Las Cruces, realized that maybe that was enough. Maybe survival and vigilance and refusing to forget were their own kind of victory. The road stretched ahead of him, empty and uncertain, and Obadiah drove into it anyway. Percival Greeley had been hauling freight through southern Arizona for 16 years, and he'd passed through the way station on AZ-86 at least 1,000 times. It was one of those permanent installations that sat like a concrete bunker in the middle of nowhere, 23 miles south of the junction with I-19, positioned to catch commercial vehicles heading north from the border. Most of the time, the station was active. Lights on, scales running, inspectors checking logs and paperwork. But tonight, at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in October, the station was dark. Not closed exactly, just empty. The scales were still illuminated, the overhead lights still working, but there were no personnel, no trucks pulled over for inspection. Just an open lane and a sign that read, "All commercial vehicles must stop." Percival slowed his Peterbilt as he approached. He'd been running hot all night, pushing to make a delivery window in Tucson that closed at 2 a.m. He was hauling electronics, high-value cargo that the shipper had specifically instructed him not to leave unattended, the kind of load that made you paranoid about every mile. He brought the truck to a complete stop on the scales, as required by law, and waited. The digital readout flickered to life, displaying his gross vehicle weight, 76,840 pounds, within legal limits. Percival expected the speaker to crackle, expected someone inside the station building to tell him he was clear to proceed or to pull forward for inspection. But there was only silence. He waited 30 seconds, then a minute. Nothing. Percival looked at the building. It was a single-story structure with tinted windows and a metal door. A light was on inside, visible through the windows, but he couldn't see any movement. His instinct was to just drive through. If the station was unmanned, that wasn't his problem. But something made him hesitate. In 16 years of running this route, he'd never seen the station completely unattended. Even during late shifts, there was always at least one person on duty. Percival put the truck in park and climbed down from the cab. The air outside was cool, desert night air that smelled like creosote and dust. He walked to the building's entrance and tried the door. It was unlocked. He pushed it open and called out, "Hello? Anybody here?" No response. Percival stepped inside. The interior was exactly what you'd expect from a way station. Institutional gray walls, a desk with a computer and scale monitors, filing cabinets, a coffee maker on a small table, a radio mounted to the wall. Everything looked normal, except for the coffee cup on the desk that was still steaming. Someone had been here minutes ago. Percival walked closer to the desk. There was a logbook open, showing entries from earlier in the evening. The last entry was time-stamped 11:39 p.m. 8 minutes ago. A truck with DOT number 988472 had been cleared through. Percival looked around the room. A door at the back led to what was probably a break room or bathroom. He walked to it and knocked. "Hello? Way station personnel?" Still nothing. He opened the door. The room beyond was a small break area with a microwave, a refrigerator, and a table. Empty. Percival returned to the main room and noticed something he'd missed before. On the floor, near the desk, were drag marks, fresh ones, like someone had dragged something heavy across the tile, leaving faint streaks of dirt. Percival's pulse quickened. He should leave. Get back in his truck and drive to Tucson and forget he ever stopped here. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. He walked back outside and scanned the parking area. There were 2 vehicles parked near the building. One was a white pickup truck with Arizona Doe T stenciled on the door. The other was a silver sedan, newer model, no markings. Percival walked to the pickup first. The doors were locked. He shined his flashlight through the window. Nothing unusual inside. Work gloves on the seat, a thermos in the cup holder, paperwork on the dashboard. He moved to the sedan, also locked. But when he shined his flashlight inside, he saw something that made him stop. On the passenger seat was a manila folder, the kind used for official documents, and clipped to the folder was a photograph. Percival pressed his face closer to the window, trying to get a better look. The photograph showed a truck, a Peterbilt, dark blue, pulling a white trailer, and written on the photo in red marker was a license plate number. Percival's license plate number. His blood went cold. He stepped back from the sedan and looked around the parking lot, suddenly feeling very exposed. Why was there a photo of his truck in that car? Who did the sedan belong to? And where was the way station operator? Percival hurried back to his Peterbilt and climbed into the cab. He locked the doors and grabbed his phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here in the desert, but it felt ominous now. He started the engine and was about to put the truck in gear when he saw something in his side mirror. A figure, standing at the edge of the parking lot just beyond the reach of the overhead lights. Watching him. Percival's hand froze on the gear shift. The figure didn't move, didn't approach, just stood there, a dark silhouette against the darker desert. Percival flashed his high beams. The figure didn't react. Percival honked the horn, still nothing, and then, slowly, the figure raised one arm and pointed at Percival's truck. Percival threw the transmission into gear and punched the accelerator. The Peterbilt lurched forward, tires squealing on the pavement. He blew through the way station without stopping, without looking back, pushing the truck up to 60 as fast as he could. In his mirror, he saw the figure still standing there, arms still raised, watching him disappear into the night. Percival drove for 10 miles before his heart stopped racing. He tried his phone again, still no signal. He reached for his CB radio and switched to channel 19. "This is northbound AZ86, mile marker 63. Anybody out there listening?" Static answered him. He tried again. "Any trucks on 86? This is a Peterbilt hauling electronics, requesting radio check." A voice crackled through the speaker. Male. Calm. "I hear you, Peterbilt. This is Quentin Haverly, Pima County Sheriff's Department. What's your situation?" Percival felt a wave of relief. "Deputy, I just came through the way station at mile marker 53. The station was unmanned, no personnel, but there was evidence someone had been there recently, and there was a photo of my truck in a vehicle parked outside." There was a long pause. Then Haverly's voice came back. "Say again? A photo of your truck?" "Yes, sir, in a silver sedan. No markings. And there was someone standing in the parking lot, watching me. I don't know what's going on, but something's not right." Another pause, longer this time. "What's your current location?" "Mile marker 63, heading north toward Tucson." "Okay, I'm going to check this out. In the meantime, keep driving. Don't stop for anything. If you see that silver sedan or anyone following you, call it in immediately. You have a phone?" No signal out here. Understood. Stay on this channel. I'll update you when I know more. Percival drove in silence, his eyes flicking between the road ahead and his mirrors. Nothing behind him, just empty highway stretching into the darkness. But he couldn't shake the image of that figure pointing at his truck, or the photograph in the sedan. Why would someone have a photo of his truck? Was it connected to his cargo? Electronics were valuable, sure, but not valuable enough to warrant this level of attention, unless it wasn't about the cargo, unless it was about something else, something Percival didn't know about. The CB crackled. Peterbilt, this is Haverly. I'm at the way station now. Can you describe the sedan again? Silver. 4-door. Looked like a Nissan, maybe an Altima, parked next to the DOT pickup. Copy that. I see the DOT truck, but there's no sedan here. Percival's stomach dropped. It was there 10 minutes ago. I saw it. I believe you, but it's gone now, and so is the way station master. What? The station's empty. No personnel, no sign of struggle. But the computer's still logged in and there's fresh coffee on the desk. Someone left in a hurry. Percival gripped the steering wheel tighter. What the hell is going on? I don't know yet, but I need you to listen carefully. The last entry in the station log shows a truck with DOT number 988472 cleared through at 11:39 p.m. Do you know that number? Percival thought for a moment. No, never heard of it. I'm running it now. Stand by an eye. Percival waited, his eyes scanning the road ahead. Still nothing. Just darkness and the faint glow of Tucson in the distance. The CB crackled again. Okay, that DOT number doesn't exist. It's not registered to any carrier in the system. Percival felt a chill run down his spine. So, someone falsified the log. Looks that way, which means someone was impersonating a commercial vehicle. And the way station master either helped them or was forced to. And now he's missing. Yeah, and that silver sedan with your photo in it. That's not a coincidence. Someone's tracking you, Greeley. And I don't think it's about your cargo. Percival kept driving north on AZ-86, his speed hovering around 70. Faster than he'd normally push a loaded truck, but slow enough to maintain control. The highway was straight here, cutting through open desert with nothing but darkness on either side. His headlights carved a tunnel through the night, illuminating the white line and the occasional reflector post. Behind him, his mirrors showed only empty road. No headlights, no silver sedan, but that didn't make him feel any safer. Quentin Haverly's voice came through the CB again, breaking the silence. Greeley, I'm checking the surveillance footage from the way station. Hold on. Percival waited, listening to the static hiss from the speaker. He checked his fuel gauge. 3/4 full, enough to make Tucson with plenty to spare, but Tucson suddenly felt very far away. Okay, Haverly said. I've got footage from the exterior cameras. At 11:34 p.m., a semi-truck matching the fake DOT number pulled into the station. Dark-colored freightliner with no company markings. Stopped at the scales, then pulled forward. The way station master, Zeke Farnham, came out of the building and approached the driver's side. They talked for maybe 30 seconds. Then Farnham went back inside. Percival's grip tightened on the wheel. What happened next? At 11:37, a silver sedan pulled into the lot. No plates visible from this angle. Someone got out, went into the station building. 2 minutes later, that person came back out with Farnham. Farnham wasn't struggling, but he didn't look happy either. They got into the sedan and drove off. So, Farnham was taken, Percival said. Looks that way. And here's the interesting part. After the sedan left, the freightliner left too. Heading north. Same direction you're going. Percival felt his stomach tighten. How long ago? You passed through at 11:47. The Freightliner left at 11:40, so it's got about 7 minutes on you, maybe 10 miles ahead, depending on speed. Percival did the math in his head. If the Freightliner was running at highway speed, it would be somewhere between mile marker 70 and 75 right now. Percival was at mile marker 68. "What do you want me to do?" Percival asked. "Keep driving, but stay alert. If you see that Freightliner, don't approach it. Don't try to pass it. Just fall back and let me know. I've got backup units rolling now." Percival switched on his high beams and pushed his speed up to 75. The Peterbilt responded smoothly, the engine settling into a steady roar. He scanned the road ahead, looking for taillights. Nothing yet. The CB crackled again, but this time it wasn't Haverly. It was a different voice. Older, rougher. "Percival Greeley, you're making a mistake." Percival grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows what you're carrying, and it's not electronics." Percival's mouth went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. Check your trailer. Really check it. Then you'll understand why we need to have a conversation." The voice cut out. Percival tried to respond, but got only static. He switched channels. Tried to raise Haverly again. Nothing. The radio was dead. Percival's mind raced. What was the voice talking about? He'd loaded the trailer himself, watched the pallets being secured, verified the manifest. Electronics. Computer components. Routers and switches destined for a tech company in Tucson. Nothing unusual, nothing illegal, but the voice had sounded certain, too certain. Percival saw a sign ahead. "Rest area 2 miles." He made a decision. He needed to check the trailer, needed to know what he was really carrying. He took the exit and pulled into the rest area. It was small, just a parking lot with restrooms and a few picnic tables. Empty at this hour. Percival parked under one of the overhead lights and grabbed his flashlight. He climbed down from the cab and walked to the back of the trailer. The rear doors were still sealed with the shipper's security tape. Unbroken. But Percival had a key to the padlock. He unlocked it and broke the seal. The doors swung open with a metallic groan. Inside, the trailer was packed with pallets, each wrapped in black shrink wrap. Percival climbed up into the trailer and approached the first pallet. He cut through the shrink wrap with his knife and pulled it away. Boxes. Just like the manifest said. He opened one. Computer components. Legitimate cargo. He moved to the second pallet. Same thing. Then the third. But when he reached the fourth pallet near the back of the trailer, something felt wrong. The shrink wrap was different, thicker, and the pallet sat lower than the others, like it was heavier. Percival cut away the wrap and found himself staring at wooden crates instead of cardboard boxes, military-style crates with rope handles and metal reinforcement. No labels, no markings. Percival's heart was pounding now. He pried open the lid of one crate with his knife. Inside, nestled in foam padding, were bricks of something wrapped in plastic. White powder. Percival didn't need to be an expert to know what he was looking at. Drugs. He was carrying drugs hidden among legitimate cargo. Someone had set him up. He stepped back from the crate, his mind reeling. How long had this been in his trailer? Had it been loaded in the same warehouse where he'd picked up the electronics? Or had someone added it later, at a truck stop or rest area when he wasn't watching? And more importantly, who knew about it? The voice on the CB had known. The people in the silver sedan had known. That's why they had his photo. That's why they were tracking him. Percival jumped down from the trailer and ran to the cab. He needed to call the police, turn himself in, explain that he didn't know, that he'd been used as a mule. But before he could grab his phone, he saw headlights pulling into the rest area. The silver sedan. It stopped 20 yards away, engine idling. The driver's door opened and someone stepped out. A man, tall, wearing a dark jacket. He walked toward Percival slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. "Mr. Greeley," the man said. His voice was the same one from the CB radio. "We need to talk." Percival backed toward his truck. "I don't know who you are, but I'm calling the police." "That would be a mistake. The police won't help you. In fact, they're part of the problem." Percival stopped. "What?" The man was closer now, maybe 10 feet away. Percival could see his face in the light from the overhead lamps. Mid-50s, weathered skin, the kind of face that had spent time in the desert. "The load you're carrying wasn't placed there by accident. It was done with the cooperation of certain individuals in law enforcement. People who are supposed to stop this kind of thing, but instead they facilitate it." "I don't believe you," Percival said. "Then explain why the way station was unmanned tonight. Explain why Zeke Farnham, the station master, cleared a truck with a fake DOT number. Explain why your manifest was approved without inspection." Percival had no answer. The man continued. "Farnham's been on someone's payroll for years. He lets certain trucks through without inspection, falsifies records, makes sure the wrong cargo looks like the right cargo. And tonight, you were supposed to be one of those trucks." "Supposed to be?" Percival asked. "We intercepted your load. We knew about it before you even picked it up. We've been watching the warehouse, watching the distribution network, and we need your help to bring it down." "Who are you?" "That's not important. What's important is that you're carrying 50 pounds of fentanyl. Street value about $2 million. If you deliver that load, you become part of a network that's killed hundreds of people. If you run, they'll find you and kill you. Your only option is to help us." Percival felt like the ground was tilting. "Help you how?" "Drive to Tucson like you're supposed to. Make the delivery. We'll be watching. When the people on the receiving end show themselves, we'll move in. You'll be protected. And when this is over, you'll walk away clean." "And if I say no?" The man's expression hardened. "Then I leave you here with 50 pounds of fentanyl in your trailer and an anonymous tip to the state police. You'll be in federal prison by morning." Percival looked at his truck, at the trailer full of poison, at the life he'd built over 16 years that was crumbling around him. "I want to talk to a real cop, someone I can verify." The man pulled out a phone and made a call. He spoke quietly, then handed the phone to Percival. "It's for you." Percival took the phone. "Hello?" "Mr. Greeley, this is Quentin Haverly. We spoke earlier on the CB." Percival recognized the voice. "Deputy Haverly?" "That's right. I'm part of a task force investigating drug trafficking along the AZ-86 corridor. The man you're talking to is one of our assets. He's telling you the truth. We need your cooperation." "How do I know this isn't a setup?" Percival asked. "You don't? But consider your options. Help us, and this ends tonight. Refuse, and you're facing federal trafficking charges. Your choice." The line went dead. Percival handed the phone back to the man. "What do I have to do?" The man smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "Get back in your truck, drive to Tucson, make the delivery at the address on your manifest. Act normal. We'll handle the rest." Percival climbed into his cab, his hands shaking. He started the engine and pulled out of the rest area. In his mirror, he saw the silver sedan following at a distance. And Percival Greeley drove into the night, carrying poison, surrounded by people he didn't trust, heading toward a destination he didn't want to reach. Tucson appeared on the horizon at 1:14 a.m., a sprawl of lights against the black desert sky. Percival had been driving for 90 minutes since the rest area encounter, and every mile felt like driving deeper into a trap. The silver sedan had followed him for the first 20 miles. then disappeared. But Percival knew they were still watching. Probably multiple vehicles now, coordinating, staying out of sight. The address on his manifest led him to an industrial park on the south side of the city. Rows of identical warehouses, most of them dark at this hour. Number 2847 was near the back of the complex. A metal building with a roll-up door and a single light above the entrance. No company name. No signs. Just a number stenciled on the door. Percival pulled his Peterbilt into the lot and stopped about 50 yards from the building. His hands were sweating on the steering wheel. He looked at his phone. Still no signal, or maybe it had been jammed. He reached for his CB radio, but before he could key the mic, it crackled to life. Greeley. It was the man from the rest area. Park in front of the building. Back your trailer up to the loading dock. When someone comes out, act normal, make small talk, sign whatever paperwork they give you. We need them to confirm receipt before we move in. Percival keyed the mic. Where's Haverly? I want to talk to the deputy. Haverly's busy. Just do what I told you. How do I know you're really law enforcement? How do I know this isn't just you stealing the drugs? There was a long pause. Then the voice came back. Harder now. You don't. But like I said before, your options are limited. Now park the truck. The radio went dead. Percival sat there for a moment, considering his choices. He could refuse, drive away. But where would he go with 50 pounds of fentanyl in his trailer? He could try to find a police station, turn himself in, hope they believed him. But the voice had said law enforcement was compromised. And if that was true, walking into a police station might be the worst thing he could do. Or he could do what they asked. Park the truck. Make the delivery. Trust that someone was watching. That this would end the way they promised. Percival put the truck in gear and drove forward. He maneuvered the Peterbilt around to the loading dock and backed the trailer up slowly, watching his mirrors, listening to the backup alarm beeping in the night. When the trailer was flush against the dock, he set the parking brake and shut off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. He sat in the cab, waiting. 2 minutes passed, then 5. Then the roll-up door began to rise with a metallic screech. Light spilled out from inside the warehouse. Percival could see figures moving in the brightness. 3 men, maybe 4. One of them walked to the driver's side of the Peterbilt and knocked on the window. Percival rolled it down. The man was young, maybe 30, with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You Greeley? Percival nodded. That's me. You're late. Window closed 20 minutes ago. I got held up at a weigh station. Had to wait for an inspector who never showed. The man studied Percival's face. Yeah? Where? AZ 86, south of here. The man pulled out his phone and made a call. He spoke in Spanish, too fast for Percival to follow. Then he hung up and looked at Percival again. The weigh station was unmanned tonight. How'd you get held up there? Percival felt sweat trickling down his back. I stopped to check my logs. Took longer than I thought. The man stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled again. Okay, come on down. Let's get you unloaded. Percival climbed out of the cab. His legs felt unsteady. The man led him to the back of the trailer where 2 other men were already opening the doors. They climbed inside and started pulling out pallets with an electric jack. They worked quickly, efficiently, like they'd done this 100 times before. One of them called out from inside the trailer. Got the package. 4th pallet, just like they said. The man with the neck tattoos nodded. Bring it out first. We'll deal with the rest later. They pulled out the pallet with the wooden crates and set it aside. One of the men pried open a crate, checked the contents, and gave a thumbs up. The tattooed man turned to Percival. Everything looks good. We just need your signature on the delivery receipt." He handed Percival a clipboard with a form on it. Percival glanced at it. It looked legitimate. A standard delivery confirmation with the warehouse address and a description of the cargo. But there was no mention of the wooden crates, no mention of anything illegal. Percival hesitated. "What about the rest of the load, the electronics?" "We'll unload it. Don't worry about it." "I need a full accounting. My company requires—" The tattooed man stepped closer. "Your company doesn't need to know anything except that you made your delivery. Sign the form, Greeley." Percival signed. His hand was shaking so badly the signature barely looked like his own. The tattooed man took the clipboard and handed Percival a copy. "You're free to go. We'll finish up here." Percival started to walk back to his truck. He'd only taken a few steps when he heard it. The sound of vehicles approaching fast, tires screeching, engines roaring. He spun around and saw them. 3 black SUVs with no lights, converging on the warehouse from different directions. They slammed to a stop and men in tactical gear poured out. Federal agents, DEA markings on their vests. The men at the warehouse scattered. The one with the neck tattoos dropped the clipboard and ran for a side door. One of the other men pulled a gun. There was shouting. Commands to get on the ground. Then gunfire. Percival dove behind his truck, hitting the pavement hard, his ears ringing from the shots. He couldn't see what was happening, could only hear the chaos. More shouting, more gunfire, footsteps running, engines revving. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence. Percival stayed behind the truck, his heart hammering. A voice called out, "Greeley, you can come out. It's over." Percival stood slowly, his hands raised. One of the federal agents approached. He was wearing a tactical vest with DEA printed across the chest. He had a rifle slung across his body, but his hands were empty. "You okay?" the agent asked. Percival nodded, not trusting his voice. "We got 3 in custody, 1 got away. You did good." Percival looked past the agent. The warehouse loading dock was crawling with the law enforcement now. Men in DEA vests, men in police uniforms, men in plain clothes. The wooden crates were being photographed and tagged as evidence. The tattooed man was on the ground in handcuffs, blood running from his nose. "What about the others?" Percival asked. "What others?" "The people who were tracking me. The silver sedan, the man at the rest area. Where's Deputy Haverly?" The agent's expression shifted. "I don't know what you're talking about. We've been running this operation for 3 months. We had a confidential informant inside the distribution network who tipped us off about tonight's delivery. There's no silver sedan, no Deputy Haverly involved in our operation." Percival felt cold. "But I talked to him, on the CB radio and on the phone." "When was this?" 2 hours ago. Maybe less." The agent pulled out a radio and spoke into it quietly. Then he turned back to Percival. "I'm going to need you to come with me. We need to debrief you, get your full statement." "Am I under arrest?" "No, but you're a material witness. And if what you're saying is true, if someone was impersonating law enforcement, we need to know about it." They took Percival to a federal building in downtown Tucson, put him in an interview room with bad coffee and fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out. 2 agents questioned him for 3 hours. Percival told them everything. The empty way station, the photograph of his truck, the voice on the CB, the man at the rest area, the silver sedan. When he was finished, the agents looked at each other. One of them said, "We need to make some calls." They left him alone in the room. Percival put his head in his hands. He was exhausted. His body ached from diving behind the truck. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what had happened. If the DEA agents didn't know about the silver sedan, then who was in it? If Quentin Haverly wasn't part of their operation, then who had he been talking to? And why had they pushed him to make the delivery if they weren't law enforcement? The door opened. A woman entered. She was in her 40s, wearing a dark suit, with a badge clipped to her belt. She sat down across from Percival. "Mr. Greeley, I'm with the FBI. We've been listening to your statement, and we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Quentin Haverly is a real deputy, Pima County Sheriff's Department. But he's been under investigation for the past 6 months for corruption, specifically for running interference for drug traffickers." Percival's stomach dropped. "So he's dirty?" "We think so, but we haven't been able to prove it until now." She leaned forward. "The man you talked to at the rest area, the one with the silver sedan. We believe he was working with Haverly. They were running their own operation, parallel to ours. They knew about tonight's delivery because they've been monitoring the same network we have, but instead of arresting anyone, they were planning to hijack the load. But they told me to make the delivery. They said they'd move in when—" Percival stopped. Understanding dawned on him. "They weren't going to arrest anyone. They were going to let me make the delivery, wait for the DEA raid, and then steal the drugs in the chaos." The FBI agent nodded. "That's what we think, and they would have gotten away with it if you hadn't told us about them. Where are they now? We don't know, but we're looking, and we need your help. We need you to testify about your interactions with Haverly. Everything he said, everything he did. It's the only way we can build a case against him." Percival thought about his truck, about his job, about the life he'd built that had been turned upside down in one night. "What happens to me? You go home, eventually. After we're done with depositions and paperwork, you're not being charged with anything. You were an unwitting courier. The drugs were hidden in your load without your knowledge. You're a victim here." But Percival didn't feel like a victim. He felt like bait. Used by one group of criminals to catch another. Used by law enforcement to catch both. And somewhere out there, Quentin Haverly was still free. Still watching. Still waiting. They released Percival at 6:32 a.m. The sun was just coming up over Tucson, turning the desert sky the color of rust. He walked out of the federal building into air that was already starting to warm, carrying the smell of creosote and exhaust. His Peterbilt was parked in a secure lot 2 blocks away. The FBI had gone through it with drug dogs and forensic teams, searching for any additional contraband. They'd found nothing. The hidden drugs had been the only surprise. Percival climbed into the cab and sat there for a long moment, not starting the engine, just staring through the windshield at nothing. His phone had 17 missed calls. His dispatcher, his wife, his insurance company, people who wanted explanations he didn't know how to give. He started the engine and pulled out of the lot. He didn't head home. Not yet. Instead, he drove south on I-19, back toward the border, back toward AZ-86. He told himself he was just curious, that he wanted to see the way station in daylight, wanted to understand what had happened there. But the truth was darker. He needed to see it because some part of him still couldn't believe it was real. He reached the way station at 7:45 a.m. In daylight, it looked completely ordinary, just a concrete building beside the highway with scales and a small parking area. There were 2 vehicles parked outside now, an Arizona Dodge pickup and a police cruiser. Percival slowed as he approached, debating whether to stop. Then he saw someone standing near the entrance, a man in a uniform, tall, wearing a cowboy hat. Quentin Haverly. Percival's blood went cold. Haverly was just standing there, arms crossed, watching the highway, watching for someone, maybe watching for Percival. Percival's instinct was to accelerate, to blow past the station and keep driving, but something made him slow down instead, made him pull onto the shoulder 100 yards past the station. He put the truck in park and sat there, engine idling, trying to decide what to do. In his side mirror, he saw Haverly walking toward him, unhurried, confident, like a man who had all the time in the world. Percival's hand moved to his phone. He could call 911, tell them Haverly was here. But would they believe him? Would they get here in time? Haverly reached the passenger side of the truck and knocked on the door. Percival hesitated, then unlocked it. Haverly climbed in and closed the door behind him. "Mr. Greeley," Haverly said, settling into the passenger seat like they were old friends. "We need to talk." Percival kept his hands on the steering wheel. "The FBI told me about you. They said you're dirty." Haverly smiled. It was a cold smile. "The FBI tells a lot of stories. Most of them are incomplete. They said you were planning to steal the drugs, that you were using me. They're right about that. Partially. But they don't know the whole picture." Haverly pulled off his cowboy hat and set it on his lap. "The way station master, Zeke Farnham. You know what happened to him?" Percival shook his head. "We found him this morning, about 10 miles from here in a ravine off Highway 86. Shot once in the back of the head. Execution style." Percival felt sick. "You killed him?" "No, but I know who did. Same people who were supposed to receive your delivery last night. Same people who've been running drugs through this corridor for 5 years. Haverly looked out the windshield at the desert. Farnham wasn't corrupt by choice, Greeley. He was being blackmailed. They had photos of him with a prostitute. Threatened to send them to his wife, his church, his community. So he did what they asked. Let certain trucks through without inspection. Falsified records. And last night, when he tried to back out, when he realized what he'd become, they killed him." Percival stared at Haverly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you need to understand what you walked into. This isn't some simple drug bust. This is a network that reaches into every level of law enforcement in this state. Sheriffs, border patrol, even some feds. People who are supposed to stop this but instead make sure it runs smoothly. And you're one of them," Percival said. Haverly was quiet for a moment. "I was. For 2 years I took money to look the other way, to tip them off when raids were coming, to lose evidence. I told myself I was just trying to survive, that everyone else was doing it too. But last night, when they killed Farnham, I realized I couldn't do it anymore." He turned to look at Percival. "The FBI thinks I'm running. They think I'm hiding, but I'm not. I came back here because I'm going to testify. I'm going to tell them everything I know, every name, every payoff, every dirty cop who's part of this." "Why?" Haverly looked down at his hat. "Because Zeke Farnham had a daughter, 16 years old. And this morning, when I heard he was dead, I thought about her. Thought about what her life is going to be like now. And I realized that's on me. I could have stopped this, could have said no, but I didn't. And now a good man is dead because I was a coward." Percival didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to believe Haverly, wanted to think that people could change, that redemption was possible. But another part of him remembered the fear he'd felt last night, the manipulation, the way Haverly had used him like a chess piece. "What do you want from me?" Percival asked. "Nothing. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for putting you in danger, for lying to you, for making you part of this." Haverly opened the door and climbed out. He put his cowboy hat back on and looked at Percival through the open door. "You should go home, Greeley. Forget this happened. Live your life. Because this world, the one I've been living in, it'll eat you alive if you let it." Haverly closed the door and walked back toward the way station. Percival watched him go, then put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. He drove north, away from the border, away from the way station, away from everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. but he couldn't shake the image of Haverly standing there alone in the morning sun, waiting to turn himself in. Couldn't shake the thought of Zeke Farnham lying in a ravine, killed for trying to do the right thing too late. Percival made it home by noon. His wife was waiting on the porch. She ran to him as he climbed down from the truck, wrapped her arms around him, held him tight. "I was so worried," she said. "The dispatcher said you were involved in some kind of police operation. Said they'd confiscated your load. What happened?" Percival held her for a long moment before answering. Then he told her everything. About the way station, the drugs hidden in his trailer, the raid, the FBI, Quentin Haverly. When he was finished, she pulled back and looked at him. "Are you in trouble?" "No, the FBI said I'm clear. I didn't know about the drugs. I'm just a witness now." "A witness to what?" "To how deep this goes. To how many people are involved." His wife was quiet, processing. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" Percival thought about that. About Haverly's words. About going home and forgetting and living his life. But he also thought about Zeke Farnham's daughter. About all the other people who'd been hurt by this network. About the fact that silence was a kind of complicity. "I'm going to testify," Percival said. "I'm going to tell them everything I saw, everything I heard, and then I'm going to hope it matters." Over the next 3 weeks, Percival gave his deposition to the FBI. He told them about the photograph in the silver sedan, about the man at the rest area, about his conversations with Haverly. The FBI confirmed that Haverly had turned himself in the same day Percival saw him at the way station. He was cooperating fully, providing names and evidence that was leading to dozens of arrests across Arizona and New Mexico. Zeke Farnham's murder was still unsolved, but the FBI said they had leads. The local news ran stories about the bust, about the corruption investigation, about the network that had operated for years, right under everyone's noses. They didn't mention Percival by name, which he was grateful for. He didn't want to be famous, didn't want to be known as the trucker who'd accidentally carried drugs and helped bring down a corrupt deputy. He just wanted to go back to work, to drive his routes and make his deliveries and live a quiet life. But something had changed. Now, when Percival drove through southern Arizona, when he passed through way stations and rest areas and small desert towns, he saw things differently. Saw the spaces where darkness could hide. Saw how easy it was for good people to be compromised. Saw how a single choice, a moment of weakness or fear, could lead to destruction. He thought about this one night as he drove south on AZ 86, approaching the way station where it had all started. It was almost midnight. The station was open this time, lights on, a new operator manning the scales. Percival pulled in and stopped on the scales. A man came out of the building. Not Zeke Farnham. Someone new. Someone who didn't know what had happened here. The man checked Percival's paperwork, verified his weight, and waved him through. Normal procedure. No drama, no hidden drugs, no corrupt deputies, just a routine stop. Percival drove away, continuing south into the desert. But as he checked his mirrors, he saw something that made him slow down. A figure standing in the darkness near the way station building, just beyond the reach of the lights, watching him. Percival couldn't see the figure's face, couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, couldn't tell if it was real or just a trick of shadows. But it was there, standing still, arms at its sides, and as Percival watched in his mirror, the figure raised one arm, pointed at his truck, just like that first night. Percival's heart started pounding. He accelerated, pushing the Peterbilt up to 70, putting distance between himself and the way station. He grabbed his CB radio, keyed the mic. "This is northbound 86. Did anyone else just pass the way station at mile 53? Static answered him. He tried again. Any trucks on 86? This is a Peterbilt requesting radio check. A voice crackled through. I got you, Peterbilt. This is a westbound freightliner. What's your situation? The voice was unfamiliar. Just another driver. Normal. Nothing, Percival said. Just checking my radio, thanks. He hung up the mic and kept driving. His hands were shaking on the wheel. He told himself he'd imagined it, that there was no figure, that his mind was playing tricks after everything that had happened. But deep down, he knew better. He knew that what he'd seen was real, that someone had been watching him, maybe someone from the network, maybe someone connected to the people who'd been arrested. Maybe just a reminder that even though Quentin Haverly had turned himself in, even though dozens of arrests had been made, the network wasn't completely destroyed. There were still people out there, still watching, still waiting, and Percival Greeley, truck driver, material witness, would have to live with that knowledge for the rest of his life. He drove through the night, through empty desert and small towns, through checkpoints and way stations that all seemed normal on the surface. But Percival knew now what could be hiding underneath. Knew that the highways he traveled every day were arteries for more than just commerce. That darkness moved through them too. That corruption and violence and exploitation followed the same routes as legitimate freight. And that, sometimes, the only thing separating the two was luck, or a dust storm, or a random inspection, or one person making one choice in one moment that changed everything. Percival reached his destination at dawn. He backed his trailer up to a loading dock, just like he'd done 1,000 times before. Workers came out to unload. They checked his manifest, signed his paperwork, sent him on his way. Normal, routine, safe. But as Percival pulled out of the lot and headed home, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched. That somewhere out there in the vast empty spaces of the desert, people were tracking him. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting to see if he would keep quiet or keep talking. And Percival didn't know which was more dangerous. He just knew he couldn't stop driving. Because that's what truckers do. They keep moving, even when they're afraid. Even when they don't know who to trust, they just keep driving. Into the sunrise, into the unknown, into a future that might hold answers, or might hold nothing but more questions. And as the Arizona desert stretched out around him, golden in the morning light, Percival Greeley drove on.